This is a compilation of over 2 hours of Elder Scrolls Protagonist lore explained, so sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with what happened to every protagonist in Elder Scrolls. Every Elder Scrolls protagonist disappears. The heroes who save Tamriel from gods, demons, and apocalyptic threats all share one disturbing pattern. The moment their quest ends, they vanish from history. Some fade into silence. One was erased by time itself. Another became a god. Here's what actually happened to all 6, starting with the hero nobody remembers, the Eternal Champion. The first Elder Scrolls hero is the only one who was completely forgotten by the lore. The Eternal Champion spent a decade collecting the 8 pieces of the Staff of Chaos to defeat Jagar Tharn, freed Emperor Uriel Septim VII from a decade of imprisonment in Oblivion, and then just stopped existing in the story. No other game references them. Not Daggerfall, not Morrowind, not Oblivion, not Skyrim, not even ESO, which takes place thousands of years earlier and could have mentioned them as a future legend. Here's what makes this so strange. Early arena materials actually named the protagonist. They called them Talon, born in 3E370. The Grateful Emperor promised they would rule by his side after saving the Empire, and then Bethesda simply never mentioned them again. The in-game books that discuss Jagar Tharn's coup and the decade he spent impersonating the Emperor never name who stopped him. The brief history of the Empire confirms the Imperial Simulacrum happened. The biography of Queen Baranzaya credits Baranzaya with secretly helping the Champion, quote, through the spirit Rhea Silmane. But the Champion's identity remained unknown to the public for years, reportedly at Uriel's own insistence. Even Alduin's Wall in Skyrim references the simulacrum in its prophecy, but never mentions the person who ended it. The community's best theory is that Okado of Firsthold, the High Chancellor you meet in Oblivion, might be the Eternal Champion. The evidence includes his extraordinary level of trust with Emperor Uriel, his position literally standing at the Emperor's right hand in the Daggerfall instruction manual, and a timeline that actually works. If the Champion was born around 3E370, they would have been roughly 63 years old by the Oblivion Crisis. Old, but not impossibly old. But that assumes the Champion was human. If they were an Altmer or Dunmer, they could have lived centuries. Without a confirmed race, we can't even narrow down their potential lifespan. The Eternal Champion could have died of old age before Morrowind. They could have still been alive during Skyrim. We have literally zero information. Here's the thing. Unlike every protagonist who came after them, the Eternal Champion was not a figure of prophecy. They were not chosen by the gods. They were just the last person left standing when Jagar Tharn's coup killed or imprisoned everyone else. They were a prisoner who happened to get a dream from a dead battle mage's ghost, and decided to do something about it. Bethesda adopted a firm policy after Arena of never canonizing player character details like race, gender, or specific actions. The Eternal Champion's total absence from later lore is not a deliberate mystery. It's the first casualty of that design philosophy. They saved the entire Empire from a decade of tyranny under an imposter emperor, and history forgot them so thoroughly that we don't even know if they lived to see the next year. At least the later heroes got mentioned in books, or confirmed dead. The Eternal Champion got nothing. They are the most successful protagonist and the most thoroughly erased. The Agent of Daggerfall, has the strangest confirmed fate of any Elder Scrolls protagonist. They were not forgotten. They were not lost to history. They were consumed by a fracture in reality itself. The Agent arrived in the Iliac Bay in 3E405 as a Blades operative on what seemed like a routine assignment. Investigate King Lysandas's ghost, recover a sensitive letter for the Emperor. Simple espionage work. But the mission spiraled into something far bigger when the Agent discovered that every major power in the region was hunting for the same artifact, the Totem of Tiber Septim, which could control the Numidium, a reality-warping brass god left dormant since the Second Era. Daggerfall gave players 6 different endings. Give the totem to the Empire, give it to one of 3 kings, give it to the necromancer Mannimarco, or give it to the Underking, who wanted to reclaim his stolen soul and finally die. There was even a cut 7th ending where the Agent activated the Numidium themselves and got killed by it. Bethesda had to pick one for canon. They picked all of them. On the 9th through 11th of Frostfall, 3E417, the activation of the Numidium triggered a dragon break. This is not a metaphor. The timeline fractured. Akatosh, the dragon god of time, was disrupted. Mutually exclusive events happened simultaneously. The 44 petty kingdoms of the Iliac Bay collapsed into 4 major powers. Mannimarco ascended to godhood and became a constellation. The Underking got his soul back and died. And somehow, impossibly, every version of the totem's fate occurred at once. The in-game book, The Warp in the West, written by Ulvius Tarot and found in both Morrowind and Oblivion, contains the critical line. The Blades filed an official report on the event, and it reads, "We unfortunately lost contact with that agent immediately after the event. His report might have gone some way to resolving the contradictory and paradoxical accounts of the event. The agent stood at the exact center of a temporal paradox where they simultaneously gave the totem to everyone and no one, and they never filed a report. The Blades never heard from them again." Lead designer Ted Peterson confirmed in a 2021 interview that Dragon Breaks were invented specifically to resolve Daggerfall's multiple endings. He called it a little bit of a betrayal of player choice, but acknowledged the narrative necessity. In a 2025 podcast, he admitted Dragon Breaks are really silly, but said he still liked the concept. But here's what matters. That cut ending where the agent activates the Numidium and dies, it became canon alongside everything else. The community overwhelmingly believes the agent is dead. Some theories go darker. The book Where Were You When the Dragon Broke describes the aftermath in apocalyptic terms. Whole armies teleported hundreds of miles. Mass disappearances, firestorms, tsunamis. Witnesses whose eyes were burned out by light nobody could explain. One person standing at the center of all that contradiction may not have simply died. They may have been shattered across the fractured timelines, unable to reconverge when Akatosh repaired himself, erased from existence entirely. The agent is the only Elder Scrolls protagonist with strong canonical evidence of death. The Blades report confirms they vanished the moment the Dragon Break happened. Their report was never delivered, and nobody in the Empire ever saw them again. At least the other heroes got to walk away. The Nerevarine. The Nerevarine has the most poetically tragic fate of any Elder Scrolls hero. They saved Morrowind from a mad god, fulfilled every prophecy, gained literal immortality, and then sailed away and never came back, not even when their people needed them most. The Nerevarine arrived in Morrowind as a prisoner in 3E427. Whether they were actually Nerevar reborn or just someone who happened to fit the prophecy is deliberately left unclear. But they destroyed Dagoth-Ur, killed 2 members of the Tribunal, left Vivek's fate undetermined, and ended the blight threatening all of Vardenfell. The Pocket Guide to the Empire 3rd edition, published 5 years later, states it plainly. The Nerevarine likewise has vanished. 1 year after that, during Oblivion, NPCs across Cyrodiil share a specific rumor. Altmer, Bosmer, and Dunmer all say the same thing. I've heard that the Nerevarine has left on an expedition to Akavir and hasn't been heard from since. This is the only canonical explanation for where they went. 200 years later, in Skyrim's Dragonborn DLC, the Telvanni wizard Neloth casually mentions them while standing on Solstheim. "You are too young to remember the Nerevarine. He defeated Dagoth-Ur and saved us all from the Blight." Here's where it gets dark. The Nerevarine is almost certainly still alive. During Morrowind's main quest, you can track Corpus disease. Devaithfire's experimental cure removes the negative effects, the madness, the deformity, but retains the positive ones. Complete immunity to all disease, and immunity to aging itself. The Nerevarine prophecy explicitly states, neither blight nor age can harm him. The last living Dwemer, Yagrum Bagarn, survived thousands of years with Corpus. The Nerevarine carries those same benefits. By the time of Skyrim, the Nerevarine would be over 200 years old, but biologically, still whatever age they were when fire cured them, probably late 20s, early 30s, functionally ageless, functionally immortal, and completely absent when Morrowind collapsed. In 4E5, Red Mountain erupted in the Red Year. Vardenfell was devastated. Vivek City was destroyed. The Dunmer people were scattered. The prophesied savior of Morrowind, immune to death, immune to disease, immune to time itself, was already gone. In the unofficial but widely referenced text, The Fall of Aldarune, the armies of Oblivion destroy the Redoran capital, and the survivors pray for help. The text reads, "Prayers to Vivek and the Nerevarine go unanswered. The hero who saved the Dunmer simply was not there when their entire world burned." Community theories overwhelmingly hold that the Nerevarine is still alive somewhere on Akavir. They were inducted into the Blades by Caius Cassades during the main quest, so it's possible they went as an intelligence operative. A minority theory suggests that Corpus was tied to Dagoth-Ur's power through the heart of Lorkhan, and destroying both might have gradually eroded the disease's benefits. Maybe the Nerevarine is mortal again. Maybe they died centuries ago, but nothing in the lore confirms that. The dramatic irony cuts deep. Nerevar was betrayed and murdered by the people he trusted most, the Tribunal. His reincarnation fulfilled every prophecy, saved everyone, and then vanished. History repeated itself in a new key. The Nerevarine walked away, and an entire culture paid the price for their absence. But at least they chose to leave. The hero of Kvatch did not get that luxury. The hero of Kvatch. The hero of Kvatch has the most definitively resolved fate of any Elder Scrolls protagonist, and it is deeply unsettling. After closing every Oblivion Oblivion Gate, recovering the Amulet of Kings, and watching Martin Septim sacrifice himself to become the avatar of Akatosh, the hero entered the Shivering Isles, the realm of Sheogorath, Daedric Prince of Madness, and they never left as the person they were. The Shivering Isles DLC revolves around the Grey March, an eternal curse. Every era, at the end of every era, Sheogorath reverts to his original form, Jiggalag, Daedric Prince of Order. Jiggalag then destroys his own realm and every soul in it before the other Daedric princes curse him back into madness. The cycle repeats forever. Sheogorath cannot break it, because he becomes the thing that perpetuates it. The hero of Kvatch broke the cycle by defeating Jiggalag in single combat, and Jiggalag, finally free after millennia, delivered the speech that ends the DLC. You now hold the mantle of madness, and Jiggalag is free to roam the voids of oblivion once more. I will take my leave, and you will remain here, mortal. Mortal? King? God? It seems uncertain. Fare thee well, Sheogorath, Prince of Madness. The hero of Kvatch became Sheogorath, not symbolically, not temporarily. They assumed the divine mantle of a Daedric prince, and Skyrim confirms it 200 years later. In Skyrim's quest, The Mind of Madness, the Dragonborn encounters Sheogorath vacationing inside the mind of the long-dead Emperor Pelagius III, and his dialogue is loaded with first-person references to Oblivion's events. He says, I was there for that whole sordid affair. Marvelous time. Butterflies, blood, a fox, a severed head. Oh, and the cheese. The fox, capitalized, is the Grey Fox from Oblivion's Thieves Guild. The severed head references the Dark Brotherhood questline. The butterflies are from the Shivering Isles entrance sequence. But here's the line that confirms everything. Sheogorath says of Martin Septim, he turned into a dragon god, and that's hardly sporting. The original Sheogorath was transforming into Jiggalag during the Oblivion Crisis. He was not present at the Temple of the One when Martin shattered the Amulet of Kings and became Akatosh's avatar. Only the hero of Kvatch was there. Only the hero saw Martin transform. Durvanin, the NPC who gives you the quest in Skyrim, previously appeared as a priest of Mania in the Shivering Isles DLC. He is still serving the same master. The continuity is deliberate. Bethesda designed this reveal carefully. The philosophical question left open is whether the hero of Kvatch still exists inside Sheogorath. The Elder Scrolls concept of mantling, walking like a god until reality cannot distinguish the mortal from the deity, suggests a merger rather than replacement. Evidence for survival includes Sheogorath's personal memories of Oblivion and a subtle personality shift. Skyrim's Sheogorath is more whimsical than cruel. His quest involves curing madness, not causing it. Fans note this feels different from Oblivion's Sheogorath, who was vicious and calculating. Evidence for consumption. After 200 years, no trace of the original mortal personality emerges beyond fragmentary memories. Sheogorath refers to his mantle as passed down from me to myself, and he casually recounts events from eras before the hero of Kvatch was born, as if he experienced them personally. The mortal may have been devoured entirely by the role they assumed. Bethesda never directly confirmed Sheogorath in Skyrim is the hero of Kvatch to maintain their policy of ambiguity, but the in-game evidence is overwhelming and clearly intentional. The mortal became a god. Whether they survived that transformation or were consumed by it is the only mystery left. At least the hero of Kvatch's fate is known. The last Dragonborn's fate remains completely unresolved. The last Dragonborn. The last Dragonborn's fate is the great unresolved question hanging over Elder Scrolls lore, and TES 6 will almost certainly answer it. After defeating Alduin and Sovngarde, and notably Alduin's soul was never absorbed, meaning the World Eater may return at the true end of time, the Dragonborn traveled to Solstheim and killed Miraak, the first Dragonborn who had been trapped in Hermaeus Mora's realm of Apocrypha for 4,500 years. The Dragonborn DLC's ending is where everything turns ominous. As Miraak dies, Hermaeus Mora declares, I have found a new Dragonborn to serve me. Later, when the Dragonborn returns to Apocrypha, Mora warns, the lure of Apocrypha will call you back. It is your fate. Miraak's final words carry a bitter edge. May he be rewarded for his service as I am. Parallel is unmistakable. Miraak spent millennia as Mora's prisoner, and Mora just claimed a replacement. The community's most widely accepted theory is that Hermaeus Mora will eventually trap the Dragonborn exactly as he trapped Miraak. The Dragonborn DLC becomes the character's last canonical act before being pulled into Apocrypha permanently. The parallel to the hero of Kvatch becoming Sheogorath after the Shivering Isles. DLC reinforces this reading. Final DLC equals final transformation. Pattern established. But the counter-arguments are substantial. material. The Dragonborn possesses a dragon soul, not a mortal soul that can be bargained away to Daedric princes, a shard of Akatosh himself. Hermaeus Mora never actually possessed Miraak's dragon soul. He trapped Miraak's body in Apocrypha and used his knowledge, but the dragon soul remained beyond his reach. When the last Dragonborn kills Miraak, they absorb his soul. Mora does not. That matters. And the Greybeards bestowed a title on the Dragonborn that carries immense weight, Ysmir, Dragon of the North. That is the exact same title held by Tiber Septim before he ascended to godhood and became Talos. The ghost of old Hroldan in Skyrim mistakes the Dragonborn for Yalti, Tiber Septim's birth name. The game is drawing deliberate parallels between the last Dragonborn and the mortal who became a god. This fuels the second major theory, apotheosis. The Dragonborn absorbs dragon souls throughout the entire game. Each one is a fragment of Akka, the oversoul of the time dragon. By the end of the main quest, the Dragonborn has consumed dozens of these divine fragments. Then they kill Miraak and absorb his soul, which itself contains thousands of years of accumulated dragon souls from his time in Apocrypha. That is an unprecedented level of divine power stacking inside one mortal body. Community lore scholars on r/Tesslore call this the third walking way to godhood, soul stack, combined with the Ysmir title, the Talos parallels, and the Shezarene theory that Elder Scrolls protagonists are avatars of Lorkhan, the missing god. Some believe the Dragonborn will mantle Talos, or merge with the Talos oversoul entirely, becoming a god not through Daedric transformation like the hero of Kvatch, but through Aedric ascension like Tiber Septim. Todd Howard has shared exactly zero details about the Dragonborn's fate or TES6's plot. He confirmed in 2025 that the game is progressing very well, but offered nothing else. Bethesda's established pattern makes one thing certain: TES6 will reference the last Dragonborn. Every game mentions the previous protagonist through books, rumors, or NPC dialogue. The most likely outcome, following precedent, is that the Dragonborn disappeared into Apocrypha, into divinity, into legend, but the game will tell us which. The Dragonborn stands at a crossroads between damnation and godhood, claimed by a Daedric prince, empowered by an Aedric gift, the only protagonist whose fate is genuinely open and awaiting resolution in the next game. But if you think the last Dragonborn story is complicated, wait until you hear about the hero who saved the world 6 times and was forgotten by history entirely. The Vestige. The Vestige occupies the strangest position of any Elder Scrolls protagonist. They are almost certainly the most powerful hero in the entire series. They have the longest list of accomplishments. They are functionally immortal, and they were completely erased from history. In 2E582, a mortal was sacrificed to Molag Bal by the Worm Cult. Their soul was ripped out, their body was killed, but their soul reformed in Cold Harbor using Azure Plasm, the Daedric material native to Molag Bal's realm, creating a perfect, indestructible new body. The in-game book Chaotic Creatia, the Azure Plasm, explains the mechanism. When Mundus faces existential threat, the Heart of Nirn spontaneously generates Paragon Soul Shriven to defend itself, in a manner analogous to the way the mortal body fights off infection. The Vestige is Nirn's immune response made flesh. This grants the Vestige functional immortality. When killed, their Azure Plasm body reforms at Wayshrines, reattuned to Nirn through Sky Shards, which are fragments of Aetherius. Even after recovering their soul from Molag Bal during the main quest's climax, the Vestige's original mortal body is long dead. They persist as a mortal soul inside an imperishable body made of Daedric material, a unique ontological status, neither fully mortal nor fully Daedric. The Vestige's accomplishments are staggering and still growing. They have personally defeated or thwarted Molag Bal, Clavicus Vile, Mephala, Nocturnal, and Mehrunes Dagon. In the 2024 Gold Road expansion, they help exile Athelia, a forgotten Daedric prince of paths, to a reality without magic. And when Hermaeus Mora erased all memory of Athelia from existence itself, he exempted exactly 2 beings, himself and the Vestige. The Vestige now carries knowledge that no other creature in all of Mundus or Oblivion possesses. Mora designated them Fate's proxy and acknowledged their unique mortal ability to reach outcomes that would otherwise be impossible, a quality not possessed by immortal beings. The Vestige has saved Tamriel at least 6 times across ESO's main quest and chapter storylines. They stopped the plane melt. They defeated the Daedric Triad. They ended the machinations of multiple Daedric princes. They are the single most accomplished hero in Elder Scrolls history by sheer volume of world-ending threats prevented. Yet no single-player Elder Scrolls game ever mentions them. Not Arena, not Daggerfall, not Morrowind, not Oblivion, not Skyrim. The Vestige does not appear in any book, any dialogue, any rumor, or any prophecy in any mainline game. They are completely absent from the historical record. ESO creative director Rich Lambert explained the deliberate design design logic behind this. Todd Howard and Matt Firor specifically chose the Second Era's interregnum, a 400-year period of chaos where practically no records survived, so the MMO could exist without contradicting established lore. 1,000 years separate the Vestiges era from Arena's events. That is enough time for even the greatest deeds to be forgotten. Only immortal beings like Daedric princes would remember, and they are not writing history books for mortals. There is one curious footnote. In Arena and Daggerfall, Dunmer NPCs sometimes exclaimed by the Soulless One. This dialogue predates ESO by 2 decades, and is almost certainly coincidental. But the UESP notes dryly, this may be coincidence. Since ESO continues receiving new content, the Seasons of the Worm Cult arc launched in 2025, the Vestiges story has no definitive ending. Their fate remains perpetually unresolved. An immortal hero with an indestructible body, accumulating world-saving accomplishments endlessly in an era the future will never remember. The most powerful protagonist in Elder Scrolls history, condemned to be the most thorough footnote. The pattern across all 6 heroes is unmistakable. Saving Tamriel is not a career, it is a transformation. The Eternal Champion was forgotten. The Agent was erased by time. The Nerevarine chose exile and immortality. The hero of Kvatch became a mad god. The last Dragonborn stands claimed by forces beyond mortality, and the Vestige persists forever in an era history will not record. None of them retire. They transcend, they vanish, or they become something else entirely, and the world moves on without them. Every Elder Scrolls game starts the same way. You're a prisoner. No name, no past, no explanation. But each of these heroes carries an origin story that runs way deeper than a jail cell. From Stolen Souls to Dragon Blood, these 8 protagonists shaped the entire history of Tamriel. Let's break down where they all came from, starting with the one who was already dead, the Vestige. Most Elder Scrolls heroes start in a jail cell. The Vestige starts on a sacrificial altar, gets their soul ripped out by a Daedric prince, and then wakes up in literal hell, which is, not ideal. It's 2E 582, the interregnum. Nobody's on the Ruby Throne, 3 alliances are tearing each other apart, and Molag Bal decides this is the perfect time to merge his realm of Cold Harbor with the mortal plane, an event called the Plane Meld, because apparently a continent-wide war wasn't enough chaos for one era. The player character gets sacrificed in a ritual orchestrated by Manamarco on behalf of Molag Bal. Their soul is physically torn from their body and dragged to Cold Harbor, but the body doesn't stop working. It keeps moving, keeps thinking, keeps fighting. No soul inside, just a remnant, a vestige of what used to be a complete person. That's where the name comes from. You're not technically alive. You're an animated husk running on whatever scraps of spiritual energy Molag Bal didn't bother to fully consume. Think of it like a photocopy of a person that somehow gained sentience and decided to fight God. Here's the thing. Being soulless makes the vestige completely immune to necromancy. Necromantic magic targets the connection between soul and body. No soul, no connection, no control. Every necromancer in Tamriel is functionally useless against you. It also explains why you can't permanently die. There's nothing for death to claim. You just reconstitute, which is one of the more elegant explanations for MMO respawn mechanics anyone has ever written. You're not breaking immersion. You're literally an undying remnant that physics doesn't know what to do with. The soul situation doesn't stay hopeless forever. Varen Aquilarios and the 5 companions devise a plan to use the Amulet of Kings to end the plane meld. They need someone who can survive a direct confrontation with Molag Bal, someone whose soul is already under his control, yet whose body persists in Tamriel. The Vestige is the only candidate. Through the amulet's power, Varen attunes the Vestige's soul back to Mundus. Not a full restoration, more like re-anchoring what's left of you to the mortal plane. You're still marked by Cold Harbor, but you're no longer drifting between states of existence like a metaphysical typo. Every other Elder Scrolls protagonist starts as a prisoner. The Vestige cranks that motif past breaking point. You're not just imprisoned, you're executed, soul-stripped, and left as a walking contradiction that shouldn't exist. The prison isn't a cell, it's your own hollowed-out body, and then you use that broken soulless husk to kill a god. But if you think getting your soul stolen sounds rough, wait until you hear about the protagonist who killed his own brother-in-law and had to flee his homeland before the story even started. Cyrus. Most Elder Scrolls protagonists are blank slates. You pick a race, you pick a face, you wake up in a prison cell, and the game says good luck. Cyrus is not that. He has a name, he has a voice, he has a family he failed, and a brother-in-law he murdered, and that makes him arguably the most human protagonist in the entire franchise. Born in Sentinel around 2E831, Cyrus grew up as Azara's younger brother, a woman who would eventually become a political revolutionary. But Cyrus wasn't thinking about politics. He was thinking about survival. Azara's husband was abusive, and Cyrus solved that problem the only way he knew how. He killed him, which is, not ideal from a legal standpoint. That murder forced him into exile. He became a mercenary, a sailor, a drifter bouncing between ports with zero interest in going home. But then, Azara disappeared. The year is 2E864. Tiber Septim's empire has rolled through Hammerfell like a freight train, and Stros Mackay is under full imperial occupation. Somewhere in that chaos, Cyrus's sister vanished while working with rebels. So he goes back. Not for politics, not for Hammerfell, for her. Here's where it gets complicated. Cyrus arrives expecting a rescue mission, and instead walks into a revolutionary movement that desperately needs a figurehead. The island is crawling with imperial soldiers, corrupt officials, pirates, and supernatural forces tied to ancient Yokudan mythology. He has to navigate all of it with actual diplomacy, something you'd never expect from a guy whose previous solution to domestic abuse was homicide. And the ending isn't some grand chosen one moment. Cyrus helps negotiate a treaty, an actual political document that preserves Hammerfell's autonomy while technically folding it into the Empire. He's not saving the world. He's saving a culture. He's ensuring that Redguard traditions and self-governance survive, rather than being crushed. That's what makes Cyrus fascinating. Every other Elder Scrolls protagonist fights a world-ending threat. Cyrus fights bureaucracy. He fights occupation. He fights the slow cultural death that comes when an empire absorbs a smaller nation. The stakes aren't cosmic. They're deeply, painfully human. Now some fans have speculated that Cyrus might be a Shezarene, a mortal incarnation of Lorcan, but there's zero textual evidence for that. What is confirmed is simpler and more interesting. Cyrus is just a guy, a flawed, guilty, stubborn guy who went home to find his sister and accidentally became the reason Hammerfell still exists as anything more than an imperial footnote. But if you think a family drama wrapped in political intrigue is intense, wait until you meet the protagonist who had to save an entire empire from a decade-long deception, all while starting from the bottom of a dungeon cell, the Eternal Champion. Here's something that doesn't get enough credit. The very first hero in Elder Scrolls history didn't save a city, didn't save a province. They crossed the entire continent of Tamriel alone to put an emperor back on his throne, and they did it over the course of 10 years. Let me explain. In 3E389, the imperial battle mage Jagar Tharn pulls off the most audacious coup in Tamriel's history. He doesn't just kill Emperor Uriel Septim VII. Instead, he banishes the real emperor to a pocket dimension, shapeshifts into his exact likeness, and rules the empire as a perfect imposter. For a decade, nobody notices. The Elder Council doesn't notice. The Blades don't notice. The entire continent just carries on while a power-hungry battle mage sits on the ruby throne wearing someone else's face, which is, not ideal. But here's where our hero enters the picture. The Eternal Champion starts exactly where every Elder Scrolls protagonist starts, in a cell, a prisoner with zero explanation for why they're there. Classic Bethesda. But unlike the prisoners who come after them, this one gets woken up by a ghost. Rhea Silman, Tharn's former apprentice, was murdered for discovering the conspiracy. Her spirit reaches through to the champion in dreams, breaks them out, and delivers the worst quest objective in RPG history. Go reassemble the Staff of Chaos. It's been shattered into pieces and scattered across every province in Tamriel. Good luck. And somehow, impossibly, they do it. From Skyrim to elsewhere, from High Rock to Black Marsh, the Eternal Champion tracks down every fragment. No fast travel lore-wise, no companions, just a teenager, estimated around 18 or 19 at the start, wandering an entire continent for a decade on the word of a dead woman they never met in life. Here's the thing that makes this protagonist foundational. They're the first player character to prove that one person can reshape all of Tamriel. Every hero that comes after, the Nerevarine, the hero of Kvatch, the Dragonborn, they all operate in single provinces. The Eternal Champion walked through all of them. That's the template for every world-saving prisoner who comes later. There's one detail that makes the champion unusual. They might actually have a name. Early arena documentation references someone called Talon, and the Elder Scrolls wiki lists them as contextually known as Talon, almost unheard of for an Elder Scrolls player character. Later games keep protagonists anonymous, referred to only by titles, but the first one might just be Talon, a 19-year-old kid who spent their entire 20s reassembling a magic staff and then killed the most powerful battle mage in the Empire. By 3E399, the champion confronts Tharn in the Imperial Palace, defeats him, and restores the real Uriel Septim VII to power. 10 years of Imperial darkness ended, and then nothing. The Eternal Champion vanishes from the historical record entirely. They save the world, and then, apparently, just leave. I don't know what to tell you, but at least the Eternal Champion got to fight their battles on solid ground. Their successor wasn't so lucky, because the next protagonist had to survive something far worse than a continent-spanning scavenger hunt. They had to survive Oblivion itself, the Apprentice. Most Elder Scrolls heroes start in chains. The Apprentice starts in a classroom. Josian Kaid or Vatasha Trinell, depending on your preference, is a trainee battle mage at the Imperial Battlespire, a fortified magical academy floating in its own pocket dimension. They're not a prisoner. They're a student about to take their final exam, which is, not ideal when your exam building gets invaded by a Daedric prince. Here's the thing about the Battlespire. It wasn't just a school. It was the Empire's premier magical training facility, a fast track into the Imperial Battle Mage Corps. The Apprentice wasn't some random nobody stumbling into destiny. They were an insider, climbing the ladder, doing everything right, and then Mehrunes Dagon kicked the ladder over and set it on fire. The timing matters. Battlespire takes place near the tail end of the Imperial Simulacrum, that same decade where Jagar Tharn impersonated the Emperor. Tharn's dealings with Daedric princes gave Mehrunes Dagon the opening he needed to launch a full invasion, slaughtering the Battlespire's inhabitants and corrupting the magical pacts keeping him out. The Apprentice steps through the teleportation portal expecting a test. They get a massacre, but here's where it gets complicated. The Apprentice has to navigate through multiple planes of oblivion, dealing with Dagon's lieutenants and an entire Daedric bureaucracy. There are factions within factions, competing interests among Dagon's own forces, and ancient divine contracts governing how much a Daedric prince can actually interfere with the mortal plane. The Apprentice doesn't just fight their way out. They negotiate, manipulate, and outmaneuver entities that have existed since before time had a name. The institutional betrayal angle is what makes this origin genuinely unique. Every other Elder Scrolls hero is an outsider who proves themselves against the world. The Apprentice believed in the system. They were part of the system, and the system failed them completely. The Empire's greatest magical institution got hollowed out from within because the people at the top were making deals with Daedric princes. Nobody warned the students. Nobody evacuated. And the resolution isn't simple either. The Apprentice ultimately forces Mehrunes Dagon to acknowledge he violated existing agreements governing his interaction with Nirn. They renegotiate the pacts, reasserting limits on his power, which raises an obvious question. If the Apprentice successfully restricted Dagon, how exactly did the Oblivion Crisis happen 2 centuries later? Turns out, cosmic contracts work about as well as mortal ones. Loopholes the size of Oblivion gates. The Apprentice is one of the least discussed protagonists in the franchise, partly because Battlespire is genuinely obscure and partly because the story operates somewhere between political intrigue and metaphysical contract law. But their origin represents something no other Elder Scrolls hero does. A person who did everything right, followed the rules, joined the correct institution, and got rewarded with the complete destruction of everything they'd worked toward. At least they got to yell at a Daedric prince about it. But if institutional betrayal by one Daedric conspiracy sounds bad, wait until you hear about the Agent, whose mission from the Emperor himself spiraled into something that literally broke reality. The Agent. Most Elder Scrolls protagonists stumble into their destiny. They wake up in a prison cell, get hit by a dragon, or lose their soul to a Daedric prince. The Agent is different. The Agent got a direct summons from Emperor Uriel Septim VII himself, because when you're part of the Blades, your vacation plans get cancelled real fast. The Agent was a trusted Blade operative assigned to the Emperor's service. Not some random soldier, but a skilled and loyal agent carrying out Imperial orders. The mission: investigate the ghost of King Lysandus, haunting Daggerfall, and recover a sensitive letter the Emperor had sent to Queen Menesra that had fallen into the wrong hands. Sounds simple enough. Handle a ghost, grab some mail, head back. Except nothing in High Rock is ever simple. The Agent stepped into a tangled web of political intrigue that makes Game of Thrones look like a city council meeting. The kingdoms of Daggerfall, Wayrest, Sentinel, and Orsinium were locked in rivalries. Noble houses, knightly orders, the Underking, and Imperial spies all plotted against each other. At the center was one impossibly powerful artifact, the Totem of Tiber Septim, the control device for Numidium, the colossal brass golem that forged the Empire centuries ago. The Agent could hand the totem to the Emperor, or one of the regional kings, or Gortwog, the Orcish warlord fighting for recognition, or to the Underking. Each choice led to a radically different future for Western Tamriel. And here's where it gets truly strange, because the universe didn't pick just one. All of those outcomes happened at once. Reality fractured. Several kingdoms expanded their power dramatically. Orsinium became officially recognized. The Empire solidified control. Logically contradictory outcomes all unfolded simultaneously. Lore calls this the warp in the West, a dragon break where time ceases to be linear and allows conflicting histories to coexist in a single timeline, and the agent was at the center, the mortal who delivered the totem and whose decisions triggered this reality-breaking event. Imagine starting your week chasing a ghost and fetching a letter, then ending it by shadering causality across an entire province. Most Elder Scrolls heroes change the world, and the world responds. The agent's choices changed the world so much it couldn't decide which ending was real. Personal agency pushed beyond all limits, turning the cosmos into a paradox. And what happened next? The agent vanishes. That's it. No retirement stories, no future cameos, no cryptic mentions. They delivered the totem, reality broke, and they disappeared from history. Whether silenced by political enemies, absorbed into the warp itself, or simply vanished under a new identity, nobody knows. The lore goes silent. What remains is a protagonist with a clear origin, a dedicated Imperial blade sent on a political errand, whose fate is one of Elder Scrolls' biggest mysteries. A spy turned paradox, a friend turned ghost story. But if you think one fractured timeline is weird, wait until you hear about the prisoner who might actually be the reincarnation of a murdered god, the Nerevarine. Every other protagonist on this list starts as a prisoner. That's kind of the franchise's thing. But the Nerevarine is the only one where the imprisonment feels engineered from the top down, orchestrated not just by an emperor, but possibly by fate itself. In 3E427, a prisoner born to uncertain parents under a certain sign arrives by boat at Seyda-Neen on Vardenfell. They've been released under direct orders from Emperor Uriel Septim VII and told to report to Caius Cosides, head of the Blades in Morrowind. On the surface, standard Imperial intelligence work. Plant an agent, stabilize a volatile province. But here's where it gets complicated. The Ashlander tribes have prophesied for centuries that Indoril Nerevar would return. Nerevar was the Chimer warlord who united the Dunmer, led them against the Dwemer at Red Mountain, and was betrayed by his own counselors. Those counselors, Vivek, Almalexia, and Sotha Sil, used the heart of Lorcan to make themselves living gods. Three mortals who stole divinity and built a religion around pretending they deserved it. The prophecy says the Nerevarine will cast down the false gods and destroy the evil beneath Red Mountain, and Uriel Septim sends one specific prisoner who matches every criterion. Uncertain parents, born under a certain sign, expendable. Now here's the question nobody can answer. Did the Emperor know he was sending the actual reincarnation of Nerevar, or was he manufacturing one? The Blades had studied the prophecy for years. The cynical reading is that Uriel found a convenient prisoner who ticked the boxes and figured he could exploit local superstition. The metaphysical reading is that destiny guided the Emperor's hand, making him an instrument of something far older than his dynasty. The game never tells you which. That's the point. What follows is one of the most complex political navigations any Elder Scrolls protagonist undertakes. The Nerevarine must earn recognition from the Ashlander tribes, navigate the Tribunal Temple's hostility, deal with the Great Houses, and confront what actually happened at Red Mountain thousands of years ago. That truth is ugly. Dagoth Ur, once Nerevar's loyal friend, has been sitting beneath Red Mountain for millennia, connected to the heart, growing more powerful and insane. He's spreading blight across Vardenfell, corrupting people through dreams, and building a Kulakon, a giant construct powered by the heart itself. The Nerevarine solution is elegant and devastating. Using Kagranak's tools, the same artifacts that created the Tribunal's godhood, they sever the enchantments binding the heart to Morrowind. One act destroys Dagoth Ur's power, collapses his plans, and cuts the Tribunal off from divine energy. Vivek, Almalexia, and Sotha Sil don't die instantly, but their godhood begins fading. The entire religious structure of Dunmer civilization starts crumbling. One prisoner rewrote the rules of divinity, which is, not ideal if you're a living god coasting on stolen power for 3,000 years. But here's what elevates the Nerevarine from fascinating to genuinely mythic. After fulfilling the prophecy and reshaping an entire civilization, they leave, sail east to Akavir, the continent nobody returns from. No explanation. Just gone. Whether they're literally Nerevar reborn or someone who fulfilled a self-perpetuating prophecy remains deliberately ambiguous. And that ambiguity is the best thing about them, because the Nerevarine exists in that perfect space between mortal and myth. But if you think tangling with living gods sounds intense, wait until you meet the prisoner who accidentally became Juan, the hero of Kvatch. This is the one that still breaks people's brains, because the hero of Kvatch doesn't just go from prisoner to savior. They go from prisoner to literal god. And the path between those 2 points is one of the wildest character arcs in gaming history. It starts, as it always does, in a cell. The hero is rotting in the Imperial City dungeons for reasons we never learn, which is basically an Elder Scrolls tradition at this point. But their life changes when Emperor Uriel Septim VII, fleeing assassins from the mythic Dawn cult, uses the prisoner's cell as an escape route. The Emperor recognizes something in this random convict and entrusts them with the Amulet of Kings. Minutes later, Uriel is dead, stabbed by mythic Dawn agents. Suddenly, this prisoner is holding the most important artifact in Tamriel with zero backup. The Dragonfires go out, barriers between Nirn and Oblivion weaken, and Mehrunes Dagon's forces start pouring through Oblivion gates across Cyrodiil. Kvatch is nearly wiped off the map. The hero earns their name by closing that first gate at Kvatch, walking into a hellscape dimension and shutting it down while an entire city collapses around them. From there, they locate Martin Septim, the Emperor's illegitimate son, and spend the crisis protecting him and closing gate after gate. The final confrontation sees Mehrunes Dagon himself physically stepping into the Imperial City. Martin shatters the amulet, transforms into an avatar of Akatosh, defeats Dagon, and petrifies into the dragon statue in the Temple of the One. The hero is named Champion of Cyrodiil, gates sealed permanently. End of story. Except it's not even close, because then the Shivering Isles expansion happens. The hero enters the realm of Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness, and learns about the Grey March, a recurring cycle where Jyggalag, the Prince of Order, destroys everything Sheogorath has built. Over the course of the expansion, the hero takes on Sheogorath's responsibilities, defeats Jyggalag, and breaks the cycle permanently. And then Jyggalag looks at the hero and essentially says, "You are now Sheogorath, not you're filling in, not you're the steward. You are the Daedric Prince of Madness." Bethesda confirmed this directly. The Sheogorath you meet in Skyrim's Mind of Madness quest is the former hero of Kvatch. A nameless prisoner who couldn't even leave a dungeon cell becomes, in sequence, an escaped convict, a courier, a gate closer, the champion of Cyrodiil, and then a Daedric Prince, an immortal, reality-warping entity that exists outside of time. That's not a character arc. That's a vertical line going straight up. Now, some fans debate the metaphysics. Does mantling mean you literally become that entity, losing your original identity? Or do you retain your sense of self while wearing the mantle like a divine costume? The lore is deliberately vague, but functionally, it doesn't matter. Whether the hero is Sheogorath or merely became Sheogorath, a mortal prisoner achieved apotheosis. No other Elder Scrolls protagonist comes close. The Nerevarine fulfilled a prophecy. The last Dragonborn defeated a world-eating dragon, but the hero of Kvatch became a god, which is, a slightly bigger deal. If you think ascending to divinity is the ceiling for Elder Scrolls protagonists, wait until you hear about the one who was born with a dragon's soul and didn't even know it. The last Dragonborn. Every other protagonist on this list had to earn their legend. The last Dragonborn was born with theirs already written in prophecy, carved into an Elder Scroll, and waiting for the world to catch up. That makes them the most terrifying hero in the entire franchise. The year is 4E 201. The Empire is fractured. Skyrim is tearing itself apart in civil war, and into this mess rides a nameless prisoner in the back of a wagon, hands bound, heading straight for the chopping block at Helgen. No trial, no fanfare. Just a sharp axe and a short walk. Then, a dragon shows up. Alduin, the World Eater, firstborn of Akatosh, the literal embodiment of the end of all things, crashes into Helgen and reduces the entire town to ash. The execution falls apart. Our prisoner slips away in the chaos, which is, not ideal for the Imperials, but pretty convenient for the fate of the entire world. Here's where it gets interesting. Shortly after escaping, the Dragonborn helps kill a dragon at the Western Watchtower near Whiterun. Normal enough, but then the dragon's soul rips out of its corpse and flows directly into the Dragonborn's body. No ritual, no spell, no preparation, just raw, instinctive absorption of a semi-divine being's essence. That's not something you learn. That's something you are. The last Dragonborn is a mortal, born with the soul of a dragon. Literally, their draconic nature grants them the ability to absorb dragon souls on contact and learn the Thu'um by instinct rather than through decades of meditation. The Greybeards spend their entire lives mastering a handful of shouts. The Dragonborn picks them up like collecting bottle caps. It takes these ancient monks about 40 seconds after the Watchtower incident to shake the foundations of their monastery, calling this person to them. When 4 monks simultaneously shout your name so hard it triggers earthquakes across the province, you know you're dealing with something significant. But what makes the last Dragonborn truly unique isn't just raw power, it's timing. Alduin's return was foretold in the Elder Scrolls themselves. The attack on Helgen wasn't random. It was the opening move in a cosmic chess game set up since the Merethic era. And the Dragonborn's role? Kill a god, not banish, not seal away. The ancient Nord heroes who first fought Alduin used an Elder Scroll to punt him forward through time rather than actually ending him. They kicked the problem down the road by several thousand years. The last Dragonborn doesn't get that luxury. They pursue Alduin all the way to Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife, where the World Eater has been devouring the souls of the dead to fuel his power. And there, the Dragonborn does what no one in history has managed. They put Alduin down, a mortal walking into the afterlife to kill the thing that's supposed to end the world. That's not heroism. That's a mythic event on the scale of creation itself. Here's what separates the last Dragonborn from everyone else we've covered. The Eternal Champion restored an emperor. The Nerevarine dismantled false gods. The hero of Kvatch sealed barriers between worlds, all massive. But the last Dragonborn confronted the literal end of everything. Alduin's function is to devour the entire world at the end of each Kalpa, each cycle of time, so creation can begin again. By defeating him, the Dragonborn isn't just saving people, they're potentially extending the existence of reality itself. Whether Alduin is permanently dead remains one of the biggest unanswered questions in Elder Scrolls lore. Paarthurnax suggests that Alduin's role as World Eater is fundamental to the structure of time, and that his end may not be as final as it appears. The universe might need its devourer, eventually, but that's a problem for another era. In 4E201, the last Dragonborn stands as the culmination of everything this series has been building toward. A prisoner who becomes a prophet, a mortal who carries divinity without belonging to any dynasty or throne. Every protagonist in this franchise started with nothing: a cell, a wagon, a sacrificial altar, and every single one reshaped the world. But the last Dragonborn? They might have reshaped eternity. The Elder Scrolls has 8 protagonists spanning over 800 years of history, and every single one of them is a walking paradox. Prisoners who save empires, nobodies who kill gods, and mortals who rewrite the rules of reality itself. So today, I'm breaking down every protagonist in Elder Scrolls and everything that makes them terrifying, starting with one who technically shouldn't even exist, the Vestige. Here's a fun way to start your hero's journey. Get sacrificed to the god of schemes, have your soul ripped out, and wake up in a Daedric prison made of suffering. That's the Vestige. No prophecy, no mysterious mentor, just death, soul theft, and a new body made of azure plasm, the magical blue goo that makes up Molag Bal's realm of Cold Harbor, which is, not ideal. In 2E 582, during the interregnum where nobody could agree on who ran Tamriel, the worm cult sacrificed the Vestige as part of a mass soul harvesting operation. The goal was to create soul shriven, broken mortals reshaped into obedient slaves. But something went wrong. The Vestige kept their free will. Their original body was gone, but their new azure plasm construct could think, fight, and say no. And here's where it gets weird. An Elder Scrolls prophecy names the Vestige as the one who will stop Molag Bal's plane melt, his plan to merge Cold Harbor with Nirn. So the Daedric prince who created this thing accidentally built the exact weapon that would destroy his entire operation. It's like forging a sword and then falling on it. Except the sword is a person, and the falling takes several hundred hours of gameplay. The Vestige's body can reconstitute after death because it's made from Cold Harbor's own essence. They die, they reform, they keep going. Effectively immortal, deeply entangled with the realm of the god they're trying to kill. Neither truly mortal nor truly Daedric, just a soulless anomaly with a grudge and a prophecy. After gathering allies and fighting through the planar vortex, the Vestige faces Molag Bal directly. They wield a blade of golden light, a weapon associated with Meridia, and with it, they literally cut Molag Bal in half, not metaphorically. They bisect a god. The plane meld collapses, Nirn stays intact, and Mundus avoids becoming a suburb of Cold Harbor. Here's the thing though, after saving the entire world 800 years before the more famous heroes even existed, the Vestige completely vanishes from history. 0 references in 3rd era texts, 0 mentions in 4th era records. An immortal, god-slaying champion just drops off the face of Nirn. Nobody writes about them, nobody remembers them, and nobody can explain where they went. For a being that literally cannot die in the traditional sense, that silence is louder than anything. But at least the Vestige had prophecy and divine backing. The next protagonist on this list had nothing but a sword and a really bad attitude. Cyrus, the Restless. Every other hero on this list has some kind of cosmic destiny strapped to their back. A prophecy, a divine soul, a Daedric prince whispering in their ear. Cyrus has a sword and a bad attitude, and honestly, he might have accomplished more with those two things than half the Chosen Ones combined. In 2E 864, Cyrus is a rootless Redguard mercenary drifting between jobs when he gets word that his sister Azara has gone missing back home on the island of Stros Mackay. So he returns, and what he walks into is a political nightmare. Tiber Septim has just conquered Hammerfell, allying with the Forebear faction to crush the traditionalist crowns. Crown resistance leader Prince Ator was obliterated at the Battle of Hunding Bay. Governor Amiel Richten has been installed as the Empire's puppet ruler, and Tiber Septim has stationed an actual dragon named Nafeal Ilargus on the island as his personal enforcer. Cyrus discovers that Azara had been part of Ator's failed rebellion, but here's where the story takes a turn. Prince Ator's soul was captured in a soul gem during the battle, and when resurrection attempts fail, his soul binds itself to his sword instead. This creates the Soul Sword, a sentient weapon carrying the dead prince's consciousness. It guides Cyrus with visions, essentially turning a political rebellion into a buddy cop story between a pirate and a haunted blade. Now here's the part that earns Cyrus his spot on this list. He kills Nafal Ilargus, an imperial dragon, stationed by Tiber Septim himself, slain by one guy with no prophecy backing him up. He then overthrows Governor Richten and forces the Empire to sign the Treaty of Stros Mackay, granting Hammerfell significant autonomy within the Empire. One island, one rebellion, and it echoes for 8 centuries. That autonomy Cyrus secured, it becomes the foundation for everything Hammerfell does afterward. When the Aldmeri Dominion rolls through during the Great War and the Empire signs the White Gold Concordat, Hammerfell says no. They leave the Empire entirely and fight the Thalmor on their own, and they win. That independent streak traces directly back to a mercenary with no divine mandate who picked a fight on a tiny island because his sister was in trouble. Some fans have linked Cyrus to the Hunding, the Yokudan make-way god who supposedly manifests through mortal heroes during times of existential crisis for the Redguard people. It's speculative, but the shoe fits almost too well. But here's what makes Cyrus genuinely unique among Elder Scrolls protagonists. He's the least prophetic hero with the most enduring political legacy. No Elder Scroll mentions his name. No Daedric prince sponsors his quest. He doesn't save the world from ending. He just makes sure his people get to keep existing on their own terms. And that decision outlasts empires. But if you think a man with a magic sword and no prophecy is impressive, wait until you meet someone who had to reassemble an entire artifact across every province in Tamriel just to undo a decade-long lie: the Eternal Champion. The Eternal Champion is the first real template for everything that comes after. Every hero who wakes up in a dungeon, every nobody who saves the world and then vanishes without a trace, it all starts here. The Champion, known contextually as Talon, started out as a magic student who got summoned to the Imperial Court to study sorcery under Rhea Silman, a prominent figure in Emperor Uriel Septim, the Seventh's inner circle. Young mage, big opportunity, learning magic at the literal seat of power. Things are going great, and then Jagger Tharn ruined absolutely everything. Tharn was the Emperor's Imperial battle mage. He got his hands on the Staff of Chaos, an artifact that could manipulate reality itself and bend planar boundaries, and whose full capabilities were so murky that even the people wielding it didn't really know what it could do, which is, not ideal when it falls into the hands of a power-hungry sociopath. Tharn used the staff to trap Uriel Septim the Seventh in a dimension of oblivion, then shapeshifted into the Emperor's likeness and just sat on the throne for 10 years. The entire empire was ruled by a fraud backed by Daedric power, and nobody noticed. This period gets called the Imperial Simulacrum, and it's one of the most disturbing stretches in Tamrielic history. Not because of war or famine, but because the guy running the continent was literally an impersonator and the whole system just kept chugging along. Rhea Silmain figured out what Tharn had done, so Tharn had her killed. Then he threw the Champion into the Imperial dungeons. The first time the Elder Scrolls franchise plays its favorite card, wrongfully imprisoned nobody, stripped of everything, left to rot. But Rhea Silmain refused to stay gone. Her spirit reached into the Champion's cell through dreams, guiding them out and setting them on a quest across the entire continent. Tharn had shattered the staff and scattered the pieces across all of Tamriel, because apparently just hiding it in a closet wasn't dramatic enough. So the Champion had to crawl through dungeons from Mournhold to Labyrinthian and reassemble this reality-bending weapon piece by piece, all while being mentored by a dead woman. Once the Champion reforged the staff and infiltrated the Imperial Palace, the confrontation destroyed both Tharn and the Staff of Chaos itself. That act pulled Uriel Septim the Seventh back from his dimensional prison and ended the Simulacrum in 3E 399, but it also permanently removed a mega artifact from the cosmic board. The Champion didn't just save the Emperor. They may have inadvertently shaped how every future reality-warping crisis would unfold. The Emperor, grateful for not being trapped in literal oblivion anymore, bestowed the title Eternal Champion on the hero. And then something deeply ironic happened. They vanished completely. No later references, no in-game books recounting their deeds, no records of what happened after the celebration ended. Titled Eternal, yet completely erased from history. The first prisoner hero, and the first to establish the pattern every Elder Scrolls protagonist follows. Save the world, then disappear like you were never there at all. But if you think a ghost-guided, continent-spanning quest sounds intense, wait until you hear about the poor apprentice who showed up to magic school and found a Daedric prince had already moved in. The Apprentice. Mama Murphy is either the most important character in Fallout 4 or the biggest fraud in the Wasteland. But the Apprentice? The Apprentice is the protagonist. Nobody remembers saving the Empire from a full-scale Daedric invasion happening at the exact same time as Arena. Here's the thing. While the Eternal Champion is running around Tamriel collecting Staff of Chaos fragments and freeing Uriel Septim, Mehrunes Dagon is launching a separate, simultaneous assault on the Battle Spire, the Empire's elite battle mage academy floating in oblivion itself. Not near oblivion, not adjacent to oblivion, literally suspended in the void between planes of existence. The Apprentice shows up expecting a normal exam. What they get instead is a fortress, overrun with Daedra, their instructors slaughtered, and Jagger Tharn's conspirators using the station as a staging ground for deeper incursions into Imperial territory. Nobody outside outside the battle spire even knows this is happening. The invasion is entirely classified. The apprentice is trapped inside a prison made out of their own school, which is, not ideal. So what do? They reverse engineer Daedric portal magic, seize control of sigil structures from Dagon's lieutenants, and systematically push the invasion back floor by floor. They're not assembling an artifact. They're not fulfilling a prophecy. They're not even getting helpful nudges from a god. They're just refusing to die while Mehrunes Dagon, a literal Daedric prince, tries to annex the Empire's magical infrastructure one corridor at a time. Eventually, they confront Dagon himself, not with the legendary weapon, not with divine intervention, just with the binding spells and sigil anchors they've ripped from his own forces along the way. They sever the planar connection, collapse Dagon's foothold, and liberate what's left of the battle spire. Whatever liberate means when most of your classmates are already dead. Here's where it gets dark. Jagar Tharn controls the Imperial bureaucracy during the simulacrum. Any records of a Daedric prince invading an Imperial academy in Oblivion would have been destroyed or suppressed the second the crisis ended. The apprentice saves the Empire's ability to defend itself against Daedric threats, and in return, they get erased. No commendation, no title, no acknowledgement in later historical texts. Not even a plaque on a wall somewhere. By the Fourth Era, the Battlespire invasion is a footnote that doesn't even exist. Canonical references in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim? Zero. The apprentice is the most obscure protagonist in the entire series, despite doing proto-hero of Kvatch work, holding planar boundaries and stopping a continent-scale Daedric assault before it even starts. 200 years later, Martin Septim gets statues for doing roughly the same thing. They defend the Empire's magical core while nobody's watching, and then bureaucracy and conspiracy erase them from history entirely. At least the Eternal Champion got a title. The apprentice didn't even get their name recorded. I don't know what to tell you, but if you think one ghost war buried in the simulacrum is bad, the next hero triggers a reality collapse so catastrophic it warps time itself across an entire region. The Agent. By 3E405, the Agent had already survived imprisonment during the Imperial simulacrum and clawed their way into the Emperor's inner circle, not just as an operative, as a close personal friend of Uriel Septim VII. And when the Emperor needed someone to handle a situation so politically volatile that it could collapse the entire Iliac Bay, he didn't send an army. He sent one person. The mission sounded simple enough. King Lysandus of Daggerfall was dead, and his ghost was haunting the city, screaming for vengeance every night. Uriel also needed the Agent to recover a letter he'd sent to Queen Menysera, one containing information about the totem of Tiber Septim, which is, not ideal when that kind of document is floating around unsecured. Here's the thing about the totem. Whoever holds it commands the Numidium, a colossal Dwemer golem that Tiber Septim once used to conquer all of Tamriel. After Septim finished his campaign, they basically parked it and threw away the keys. The totem was locked in the Daggerfall treasury. The Mantella, a massive soul gem that powered the thing, was hidden in an entirely different plane of existence called the Mantellan Crux. Two keys to one apocalypse, kept as far apart as physically possible. So, naturally, everybody wanted both. What started as a ghost investigation turned into a full-scale political arms race. Regional kings, the Underking, the Blades, and Mannimarco the King of Worms were all scrambling for the totem and the Mantella. Every single one of them had a different vision for what a reactivated Numidium should do, and every single one of those visions involved them being in charge. The Agent was sitting in the middle of this, holding the keys to a reality-breaking weapon while necromancers and monarchs circled like vultures. The Agent retrieved both artifacts and made a choice about who would control Numidium. But here's where it gets complicated. On the 9th of Frostfall, 3E417, something called the Warp in the West occurred. Imperial records describe it as a miracle, which is a very polite word for reality having a complete nervous breakdown. Numidium activated in multiple locations simultaneously. Mutually exclusive political outcomes, things that could not logically coexist, all collapsed into one coherent timeline. Kingdoms expanded, power shifted, all at once, all in a single day. The Agent's choices were so loaded with consequence that the timeline couldn't hold a single version of events. Multiple histories played out and then fused together. Like the universe couldn't decide which save file to load, so it just loaded all of them, and then the Agent vanished. The Blades lost contact immediately after the warp. No body, no farewell, no forwarding address. Some theories suggest they died in the reality collapse. Others propose they ascended beyond mortal existence. The most unsettling theory is that the warp dislocated them from linear time entirely, that the person who broke causality got swallowed by the cracks they created. It's a perfect paradox. The Agent triggered a timeline collapse, and that same collapse erased them from the timeline. They didn't just change the political map, they fractured reality itself, and reality returned the favor. But if you think breaking time is impressive, wait until you hear about the hero who killed a god and fulfilled a prophecy that had been brewing for thousands of years. The Nerevarine. The Nerevarine prophecy states, Azura will resurrect in Doril Nerevar after the tribunal corrupted themselves with the heart of Lord Lorcan and caused his death. And before you roll your eyes, hear me out, because this is Azura's ultimate gambit, bending dawn and dusk to punish the Tribunal's theft of godhood. The prophecy specifies a prisoner born on a certain day to uncertain parents, sent to Morrowind under Imperial Guard. When Morrowind begins in 3E427, the player character fits this exactly, an anonymous prisoner arriving at Seyda-Neen aboard an Imperial prison ship, released on the personal orders of Uriel Septim VII. But here's where it gets weird. The Nerevarine is not the first attempt. Multiple failed incarnates bore Nerevar's spirit, but had critical flaws. Every single one died or was executed by the Tribunal Temple, their souls now lingering in the cavern of the incarnate. The Nerevarine is the final roll of the dice. At the core of this conflict lies the heart of Lorcan, buried beneath Red Mountain. The Dwemer first tapped it using Kagranak's tools, Sunder, Keening, and Wraithguard. Later, the Tribunal used those same tools to make themselves living gods after Nerevar's death. But Dagoth Ur, once Nerevar's ally, was left to guard the heart and fell under its influence. By 3E427, he's building a Kulakan, a second Numidium powered by the heart, to drive out the Empire and reshape Morrowind. The heart of Lorcan is a literal divine spark, the animating essence of a creator god. Controlling it means controlling one of the last active mortal god pipelines in Tamriel. The Nerevarine solution is radical. They use Sunder and Keening on the heart, disrupting its network of divine connections. This breaks Dagoth Ur's link, causing his physical form and a Kulakan to collapse. But it also severs the Tribunal's access, ending their godhood entirely. Vivek, Almalexia, and Sothasil lose their immortality. The Nerevarine closes the First Era apotheosis loophole, ensuring no future aspirants can tap the heart for divine power. But the Tribunal's guilt is ambiguous. Some texts propose they killed Nerevar to seize the heart's power. Others hint he died of wounds, and their real sin lies in oath-breaking. So the question becomes, is the Nerevarine avenging murder or enforcing cosmic balance? Nobody knows for sure, because the Tribunal aren't talking and Nerevar's spirit is fragmented across multiple failed incarnates. In the Tribunal expansion, the Nerevarine travels to Mournhold and kills the maddened Almalexia, who descends into paranoia and tries to murder them. In Blood Moon, they thwart Hircine's great hunt on Solstheim. By the end of it all, the Nerevarine has dismantled the last remnants of the Tribunal's power and rewritten the religious and political landscape of Morrowind. Sometime after 3E433, the Nerevarine departs on an expedition to Akavir and is never heard from again. No confirmed sightings, no letters, no follow-up. By Skyrim, they're a figure of the relatively recent but already mythic past. The mystery keeps them alive in the lore long after they vanish from the historical record. But if you think one divine champion rewriting an entire province's fate is intense, wait until you hear about Prisoner, who ended the Third Era, stopped a continent-wide Daedric invasion, and then became a Daedric prince himself. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen. Now, the Hero of Kvatch. The Hero of Kvatch is the ultimate prisoner success story. Imprisoned for unknown reasons in the Imperial prison in 3E433, they're rotting in a cell when Uriel Septim VII flees through it to escape the Mythic Dawn. The Emperor looks at this nobody, has a prophetic vision, and decides they're the one from his dreams. Before anyone can process this, the Mythic Dawn kills him. The hero is handed the Amulet of Kings and told to find Martin, the Emperor's hidden heir. That's the moment an anonymous prisoner becomes the pivot point for the entire continent's survival. They arrive in Kvatch to find it under full Daedric siege. Oblivion gates are tearing reality apart. The city's burning, and Martin is trapped somewhere in the chaos. The hero closes the gate, rescues Martin, and earns the title Hero of Kvatch. It's the beginning of escalating heroism that will define the entire Oblivion crisis. But here's where the stakes get cosmic. The Amulet of Kings contains Akatosh's literal blood, passed down through the Septim line. When the Emperor wears it and lights the dragon fires in the Temple of the One, it creates a barrier that prevents Daedric princes from freely invading Mundus. The Mythic Dawn didn't just assassinate the royal family, they broke the cosmic lock on reality. Without the dragon fires lit, Mehrunes Dagon can do what no Daedric prince has managed before: physically step into Tamriel. In the Battle of the Imperial City, he does exactly that. A 4-story avatar of the Daedric Prince of Destruction walks through a massive gate into the heart of Cyrodiil. Martin takes the Amulet of Kings, shatters it, and transforms into an avatar of Akatosh, a colossal dragon of flame and stone. The two titans fight. Akatosh wins, banishing Dagon back to Oblivion. Then the dragon turns to stone in the Temple of the One, and Martin is gone. The hero of Kvatch saved the Empire, but Martin's sacrifice extinguished the Septim bloodline and destroyed the amulet, meaning the Dragonfire's covenant cannot be renewed. The Third Era ends. The Fourth Era begins. The metaphysical rules governing Daedric invasion are permanently altered, and the hero is left standing in the wreckage of an empire they preserved but could not restore. that's not where their story ends. In Knights of the Nine, they become the Divine Crusader, don Pelennor Whitestrake's ancient relics, and destroy Umaril the Unfeathered Soul in the spiritual realm, ensuring he can never return. In Shivering Isles, they break the Grey March cycle by defeating Jiggalag, freeing him from his curse as Sheogorath, and then mantling Sheogorath themselves. They ascend as the new Daedric Prince of Madness. By the time of Skyrim, Sheogorath remembers the events of Oblivion firsthand, strongly implying he is the former hero of Kvatch, now fully divine and immortal in Oblivion. The community consensus is clear. The hero of Kvatch is arguably the greatest hero in the series. They ended a continent-wide Daedric invasion, closed the Third Era, and became a god. Their reward for saving the Empire was madness, immortality, and an eternity in the Shivering Isles. If you think ascending to Daedric Prince status is a happy ending, wait until you hear about the mortal who killed a god dragon at the literal end of time. The last Dragonborn. The last Dragonborn has a dragon soul in a mortal body. That's not a metaphor. They're literally a hybrid being that can learn dragon shouts in seconds by devouring other dragons' souls, while the Greybeards spent decades meditating on a single word. In 4E201, they're a prisoner being transported to execution at Helgen, when Alduin, the World Eater himself, attacks and destroys the entire town. The Dragonborn escapes in the chaos, and that moment is cosmically deliberate. The prophecy of the Dragonborn states, the World Eater wakes, and the wheel turns upon the last Dragonborn. Alduin's return and their emergence are locked together. They're summoned to High Hrothgar, where the Greybeards recognize their draconic soul after they absorb their first dragon outside Whiterun. The Dragonborn learns shouts at a speed that breaks every established rule of Thu'um mastery. Dragons study for centuries. The Dragonborn hears a word once, kills the dragon that spoke it, absorbs its soul, and instantly masters the concept. But to defeat Alduin, they need Dragonrend, Jor-Zaf rule, mortal finite temporary, the one shout that forces dragons to experience mortality, to comprehend the idea that they can end. Dragonrend weaponizes that rejection, dragging them out of the sky and making them vulnerable. To learn it, the Dragonborn uses an Elder Scroll atop the throat of the world and witnesses the past. They literally watch the first use of Dragonrend during Alduin's ancient defeat and steal the shout directly from history. The timeline bends. With Dragonrend in hand, they travel to Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife, and confront Alduin beyond the mist. This is the final battle. The World Eater, the firstborn of Akatosh, versus a mortal prisoner with a dragon soul. The ancient heroes of Sovngarde join the fight, and together they bring Alduin down. His body disintegrates. His soul does not appear. Whether he's truly dead or just delayed is the question nobody can answer. Some scholars argue Alduin cannot die because he is an aspect of time itself. Others believe the Dragonborn permanently eliminated him. The game gives no confirmation. The Dragonborn's story doesn't end there. In Dawnguard, they stop the vampire Lord Harkon from using an Elder Scroll to blot out the sun and plunge Tamriel into eternal night. In Dragonborn, they travel to Solstheim and kill Miraak, the first Dragonborn who betrayed dragons millennia ago and has been siphoning their dragon souls from Apocrypha. Miraak dies in Hermaeus Mora's realm, and the Dragonborn either resists deeper entanglement with the Daedric Prince or becomes his reluctant champion. Either way, Miraak is gone. Their defining power is the ability to devour dragon souls and permanently prevent their resurrection. Dragons can normally be brought back by another dragon using their name, but once the Dragonborn consumes a soul, it's gone, erased. This makes them the ultimate dragon killer and the cosmic fulcrum upon which the entire Dragon Crisis pivots. Without them, Alduin wins. No later games exist to chronicle what happens next. Fan debates focus on whether the Dragonborn goes to Sovngarde, remains trapped by Hermaeus Mora, or reincarnates in future epochs as another prisoner. The prophecy said the wheel turns upon them, but it didn't say what happens after the turn completes. Maybe the Dragonborn's soul is too tangled with dragons and Daedra to ever rest. The story is unresolved because the Fourth Era is still unfolding, and the last hero in the franchise's timeline is the one whose fate remains most open. Everyone assumes the last Dragonborn is the most beloved Elder Scrolls protagonist because Skyrim sold 60 million copies, but he's not even close. The actual fan favorite is a character most casual players have never heard of, and today, we're ranking all 6 main protagonists from most forgotten to most loved based on actual community sentiment, starting with a hero so invisible that even hardcore fans forget he exists. The Eternal Champion. The very first Elder Scrolls protagonist is also the most forgotten. His name was Talon. He was an apprentice studying sorcery under Rhea Silmain at the Imperial Court when everything went wrong. The Imperial battle mage Jagar Tharn murdered both Silmain and imprisoned Emperor Uriel Septim VII in a pocket dimension of Oblivion, then threw Talon into the Imperial dungeons as the last living witness. Here's where it gets interesting. Silmain's ghost, contacted Talon from beyond death and guided him on a quest that lasted an entire decade, 10 years. From 3E389 to 3E399, the Eternal Champion traveled across every province of Tamriel, collecting 8 pieces of the Staff of Chaos from 16 different dungeons. But Tharn had drained the staff's power into the Jewel of Fire, basically turning himself into a lich. In the final battle beneath the Imperial Palace, Talon used the reassembled staff to drain the jewel and disintegrate Tharn into ash. The Emperor was freed. Talon received the title Eternal Champion and was promised he would rule by the Emperor's side. And that makes him unique among every protagonist because he had 0 special powers. No prophecy, no dragon blood, no divine blessing. He was literally just the last person alive who knew the truth. The unchosen one who spent a full decade fixing everything manually, but nobody remembers him. Walk into any Elder Scrolls discussion, and the Eternal Champion generates exactly 0 conversation. Arena came out in 1994, and the game was never supposed to be an RPG. It was designed as a gladiatorial combat game, where you'd fight across arenas until becoming Grand Champion in the Imperial City. The RPG side quests became more engaging during development, so they dropped the arena concept entirely. Lead developer Vijay Lakshman spent 1 month writing what he described as 5 books worth of narrative content, and the protagonist had almost no characterization by design. The cultural legends surrounding the Eternal Champion are fascinatingly contradictory. Nords claim he was a king's son. Dunmers say she was a daughter of Almalexia. Bosmer call her an Ayleid descendant. Vampire clans insist the champion was a vampire from beyond Nirn. Nobody knows who Talon actually was because the game gave you complete freedom to be anyone. Here's the problem. Arena is 30 years old. Almost nobody in the modern fanbase has played it. In every Reddit poll, every tier list, every forum ranking, the Eternal Champion lands dead last. The most affectionate comment you'll find is from an ESO forum user who said, "Every time you're struggling with your PUG and Crypts of Hearts, remember the Eternal Champion soloed all of them." That's it. That's the peak of his cultural relevance. Even Alduin's Wall in Skyrim prophesied the events of Arena as the first event, confirming the Imperial Simulacrum's cosmic significance. The champion themselves vanished from history completely. Despite the Emperor's promise of shared rulership, Talon never appears again in any game, any book, any reference. He saved the entire empire and became a historical footnote. The most important thing the Eternal Champion did was start a franchise. Everything after that belongs to someone else. The Agent, the hero of Daggerfall, triggered one of the most reality-breaking events in Elder Scrolls history, and almost nobody knows it happened. Born in 3E375, the Agent was a Blades operative sent by Emperor Uriel Septim VII to the Iliac Bay with 2 missions. Investigate the ghost of King Lysandus haunting the streets of Daggerfall, and recover a compromising personal letter the Emperor had written to Queen Minnesera. The Agent's ship wrecked on the Western Cliffs, and here's what makes them unique. They're the only Elder Scrolls protagonist who escaped their opening prison without supernatural help. No guiding ghost like the Eternal Champion. No Emperor opening your cell like the hero of Kvatch. No dragon attack like the Dragonborn. Just privateers, a cave, and your own ability to survive. What the Agent uncovered was a web of political intrigue involving 7 factions all fighting over the same artifact, the Totem of Tiber Septim. This thing controlled the Numidium, the colossal Dwemer brass golem that Tiber Septim used to conquer all of Tamriel. Emperor Uriel wanted it. 3 kings wanted it. The orc leader Gortwag Gro Nagorm wanted it to legitimize Orsinium. Manamarco, the King of Worms, wanted it for necromantic power. And the Underking, Zurin Arctus, Tiber Septim's former battle mage, wanted his soul back from the Mantella powering the machine. Daggerfall shipped with 6 mutually exclusive endings. You could give the totem to any of these factions. And instead of picking one as canon, Bethesda made all of them happen simultaneously through a dragon break, a rupture in the fabric of time itself. During 2 days in 3E417, every faction activated the Numidium at once. Time became non-linear. Minutes lasted years. Whole armies teleported hundreds of miles. A Blades agent had her eyes burned from their sockets just witnessing it. The 44 independent kingdoms of the Iliac Bay consolidated into 4: Daggerfall, Sentinel, Wayrest, and Orsinium. Manamarco ascended to godhood and became a constellation. The Underking reclaimed his soul and finally died. Reality broke and repaired itself in a way that made every player choice canon. The agent themselves may have been killed by the Numidium. The Blades never contacted them again. Lore suggests they died during the warp in the West, erased by the same temporal event they caused. The Dragon Break concept was created by developer Ted Peterson specifically to solve the sequel problem, but Bruce Nesmith, who later became Skyrim's lead designer, publicly expressed regret about it. He said the Dragon Break could have been handled better, which is fascinating because lore fans consider it one of the most brilliant narrative devices in the entire franchise. The idea that multiple contradictory timelines can all be simultaneously true is peak Elder Scrolls metaphysics. A cut feature would have let you import your arena character, making the agent and eternal champion the same person. Bethesda confirmed they're canonically separate individuals. Community sentiment mirrors the eternal champion's obscurity, but slightly warmer. One ESO forum user summarized it perfectly. The agent of Daggerfall was in the right places at the right times. That's about it. Reddit discussions routinely dismiss them. In power rankings, the agent places above the eternal champion solely because they controlled the Numidium, however, briefly. Their story is the most politically sophisticated of any protagonist, but it reads like a history textbook rather than a character arc. The agent caused the warp in the West and then vanished, possibly atomized by their own success. But if you think breaking reality is impressive, wait until you meet the protagonist who beat a Daedric prince in his own realm while technically being undead, the Vestige. The Vestige has accomplished more than every other Elder Scrolls protagonist combined, and the community does not care at all. Set in 2E582, roughly 800 years before Skyrim, the Vestige was a mortal who got murdered by the necromancer Mannimarco as a sacrifice to Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of domination. Their soul was ripped out, and they were thrown into the Wailing Prison in Cold Harbor, the literal plane of oblivion ruled by the King of Rape. Here's where the metaphysics get weird. When a mortal's soul is replaced by a Daedric vestige, they reform from chaotic creatia, called azure plasm. Most soul shriven become degraded copies that slowly lose their minds. But the vestige possessed an anuic aspect, an intrinsic connection to the forces of creation that produced a perfect duplicate. They kept their memories, their personality, their appearance, and gained functional immortality. Every time they die, they reform at a way shrine. Even after recovering their soul later, their body remains azure plasm. They are technically a form of Daedra with a mortal soul grafted back in. That has never happened before in Elder Scrolls lore. The accomplishment list is absurd. The Vestige reunited the 5 companions, retrieved the Amulet of Kings, got imbued with Akatosh's divine power, and defeated Molag Bal in personal combat inside Cold Harbor. They forced a Daedric prince to release all stolen souls. Then, across years of DLC content, they stopped Nocturnal from seizing control of the entire multiverse, battled dragons and elsewhere, confronted Mehrunes Dagon, faced the forgotten Daedric prince Athalia, who recognized them as a pathwalker, and saved Tamriel approximately 17 different times. One fandom user ranked the Vestige as the second strongest protagonist. He defeated Molag Bal in his own realm using the Amulet of Kings. He defeated Nocturnal when she was literally trying to become ruler of the Elder Scrolls multiverse. By feat count alone, the Vestige should dominate every power ranking, but nobody loves them. The problem is ESO, the inherent MMO problem. Thousands of simultaneous vestiges running around conflicts with the Elder Scrolls tradition of a singular prisoner hero. NPCs call the Vestige mercenary or traveler regardless of accomplishments. The character shows no memory of previous quests across DLCs. Game director Rich Lambert acknowledged the rough 2014 launch. We didn't have an identity. The protagonist felt generic, and the game struggled to capture the single-player experience. Community pushback is brutal. Critics note the Vestige needed external divine power for every major fight. The Amulet of Kings against Molag Bal, Meridia's blessing in Cold Harbor. They don't have innate abilities like Dragon Souls or CHIM or the Mantella. A common sentiment, they're the most powerful errand runner in Tamriel. The Vestige lacks distinctive memes, iconic moments, or a recognizable visual identity. You cannot picture the Vestige's face because they don't have one. The split is clean. The ESO community respects the resume. Single-player fans dismiss the character entirely. The Vestige is respected more than loved, defined by volume rather than personality. They saved the world more times than anyone else and generated less fan art than a mud crab, but at least the Vestige's accomplishments are debatable. The next protagonist conquered pop culture so completely that casual fans assume he's the franchise, while lore purists call him the most boring hero Bethesda ever wrote, the last Dragonborn. No Elder Scrolls protagonist is more famous than the Dovahkiin. Skyrim sold over 60 million copies. The horned helmet is recognizable to people who have never touched a video game. Fus Roda became one of gaming's most iconic catchphrases within days of the November 2011 launch, and the lore-focused Elder Scrolls community thinks he's kinda boring. The last Dragonborn is a mortal blessed with the blood and soul of a dragon by Akatosh. They can absorb dragon souls, learn Thuum shouts instinctively, and their prophecies answered, Alduin the World Eater returning to destroy the world. The name Dovahkiin parses as Dov-Akin, born hunter of dragonkind. They're the first Dragonborn since Tiber Septim to be summoned by the Greybeards, who named them Eismir, Dragon of the North, the same title held by the man who became the god Talos. The story hits every epic fantasy beat. The Helgen dragon attack during a near execution. The first dragon kill outside Whiterun, where guards witness soul absorption in absolute awe. The climb to High Hrothgar. The revelation that Paarthurnax, the Greybeards' leader, is a dragon who once served Alduin. The journey to Sovngarde to fight Alduin alongside 3 ancient Nord heroes. It's a straightforward hero's journey with dragons, and it works. The Dawnguard DLC introduces Serana, voiced by Laura Bailey, one of gaming's most beloved companion characters, and the vampire Lord Harkon's plot to blot out the sun using Ariel's bow. The Dragonborn DLC pits the hero against Miraak, the first Dragonborn in Hermaeus Mora's realm of Apocrypha. And here's the dark implication. Mora calls the last Dragonborn his new champion at the end, suggesting eventual servitude to the Daedric Prince of forbidden knowledge. That's the implied fate. Eternal slavery to an eldritch horror. Todd Howard's design philosophy centered on simplicity. The dragon concept had a one-page design document. Howard wanted to eliminate the restart problem from Oblivion, where players would spend 3 hours, think I chose wrong, and start over. Skyrim lets you play first and develop naturally. Any race can be Dragonborn. Howard cheerfully noted you can be an Argonian lizard who is Dragonborn. The cultural impact is staggering. Fus Roda spawned thousands of videos. I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee, deliberately written by Emil Pagliarulo to give guards personality. Spawned t-shirts, tattoos, references in The Simpsons and NCIS, and has its own Wikipedia page. The opening cart scene, "Hey you, you're finally awake," became a meme format that lasted a decade. The stealth archer phenomenon, every player defaulting to sneak archer regardless of intended build, became a beloved community joke. Skyrim is everywhere. The Dragonborn is an icon, but in lore-focused communities, the Dragonborn takes a beating. The criticism is consistent, generic chosen one, where the Nerevarine had to politically maneuver across great houses and Ashlander tribes, actively earning the title through ambiguous prophecy fulfillment. The Dragonborn simply is Dragonborn, discovered passively when a dragon dies near Whiterun. You absorb the soul and guards go, "You're Dragonborn, you didn't do anything. You were born special." A Reset-era user captured the sentiment perfectly. What I took from this thread is basically it's just a fight between Nerevarine and COC. Dragonborn is a jobber. The implied fate of servitude to Hermaeus Mora feels ignoble compared to becoming a god of madness or sailing to an uncharted continent. Fans love Skyrim the game more than they love the Dragonborn the character. The protagonist is a vehicle for the player to experience dragons, not a compelling figure in their own right. The Dragonborn conquered pop culture and lost the hardcore fanbase. But if you think that's a harsh judgment, wait until you meet the protagonist who went from literal nobody to a Daedric prince, the hero of Kvatch. The hero of Kvatch has the most satisfying character arc in the entire franchise. They start as an anonymous prisoner with 0 special powers, and end as a Daedric prince, 0 to god of madness. Nobody else comes close to that trajectory. They begin in the Imperial City dungeon where Emperor Uriel Septim VII, fleeing Mythic Dawn assassins through an escape route that happens to pass through their cell, recognizes them from prophetic dreams. Before dying, Uriel entrusts them with the Amulet of Kings, and the task of finding his secret illegitimate son, Martin Septim. That's it. That's the entire qualification. The Emperor had a dream about you. The brilliant narrative choice is positioning the hero as a supporting character to Martin's story. Martin is the true savior, a humble priest of Akatosh, who discovers he's the Emperor's heir. The hero enables everything, closing the first Oblivion Gate at Kvatch, which earns them their title, gathering allies for the Siege of Bruma, infiltrating the Mythic Dawn cult, retrieving the amulet from Mankar Cameron's pocket dimension of paradise. The hero does the work, while Martin becomes the legend. In the climax, Mehrunes Dagon physically manifests in the Imperial City, his full body, a Daedric prince walking through the streets of the capital destroying everything. Martin shatters the Amulet of Kings, becoming an avatar of Akatosh, a colossal dragon god who defeats Dagon and is permanently transformed into a stone statue in the Temple of the One. The Septim bloodline ends forever. Martin's last words to the hero, the shape of the future, the fate of the Empire, these things now belong to you. And then, the Shivering Isles. DLC elevates everything. The hero enters Sheogorath's realm of madness to stop the Grey March, a cyclical destruction by Jyggalag, the Daedric Prince of Order. Here's the backstory. Jyggalag was so powerful that the other Daedric princes feared him and cursed him to become the thing he hated most, Sheogorath, the embodiment of chaos and madness. At the end of every era, Jyggalag breaks free, destroys the Shivering Isles as the Grey March, and then transforms back into Sheogorath with no memory of what happened, an eternal cycle. The hero defeats Jyggalag in combat and inherits the mantle of Sheogorath through a process called mantling. In Elder Scrolls metaphysics, mantling is when a mortal becomes indistinguishable from a god by perfectly embodying them. The hero of Kvatch literally becomes a Daedric prince, and Skyrim confirms it. During the Mind of Madness quest, Sheogorath references events only the hero would know. Butterflies, blood, a fox, a severed head. Oh, and the cheese. The Shivering Isles entrance involved butterflies, the Grey Fox from the Thieves Guild questline, Mathieu Bellamont's mother's severed head from the Dark Brotherhood, and Martin Septim transforming into a dragon, the cheese, because Sheogorath watched his only friend sacrifice himself to save the world. If this is the hero of Kvatch, and all evidence suggests it is, it marks the only time two Elder Scrolls player characters meet. The character accumulates more canonical titles than any other protagonist: Savior of Bruma, Champion of Cyrodiil, Divine Crusader if you complete the Knights of the Nine DLC. And the best part is they earned every single one through effort, not birthright. Fan sentiment is overwhelmingly positive and trending upward. CBR wrote an article arguing the hero of Kvatch is arguably the most powerful protagonist in the series. An ESO forum user stated plainly, COC is the strongest one. He became a Daedric prince while Dragonborn was manipulated by Hermaeus Mora. The Oblivion meme ecosystem, the adoring fans screaming by Azura, by Azura, by Azura, and guard dialogue like, stop, you violated the law, creates an endearing cultural context around the game. The 2025 Oblivion remastered release reinvigorated this love. Fans call the hero underrated so frequently that the label became its own form of consensus. The community's beloved underdog who started with nothing, saved the world as someone else's sidekick, and ascended to literal godhood. But if you think becoming a Daedric prince is the peak, there's one protagonist the community loves even more, and their greatest accomplishment was walking away. The Nerevarine. The Nerevarine wins. Across Reddit polls, forum rankings, tier lists, and lore debates, Morrowind's protagonist consistently claims the top spot among the engaged Elder Scrolls community, and the reasons run deeper than nostalgia. The Nerevarine is the literal reincarnation of Indoril Nerevar, the ancient chimere Hortator who united the Dark Elf people 4,000 years ago and was betrayed by his closest allies. Vivek, Almalexia, and Sothasil, the Tribunal, used forbidden Dwemer tools on the heart of Lorkhan to transform themselves into living gods, possibly murdering Nerevar in the process. The Daedric Prince Azura cursed them for this betrayal, turning all Chimer into ashen-skinned Dunmer, and prophesied Nerevar's return. Over millennia, many tried to fulfill the prophecy and failed. Their ghosts reside in the cavern of the incarnate, encouraging the true incarnation. You are the Nerevarine. You are the chosen. You can't fail. What separates this from generic Chosen One narratives is ambiguity. The game never confirms whether you truly are Nerevar reborn or just someone who happens to fulfill the criteria. Bethesda committed to never resolving this, and the Nerevarine must earn every title through political maneuvering, convincing all three great houses, Redoran, Hlalu, and Telvanni, to name you Hortator, convincing all four Ashlander tribes, the Urshalaku, Ahemusa, Zainab, and Arabanimson, to proclaim you Nerevarine. This requires persuasion, bribery, completing faction questlines, and sometimes violence. The Corpus Disease sequence is the franchise's most brilliant narrative mechanical moment. Infected by Dagoth Gers, who delivers Dagoth Ur's hauntingly respectful offer of alliance, once we were friends and brothers. Lord Nerevar, the Nerevarine visits the 4,000-year-old Telvanni wizard Devaith Fear. You venture into the Corpusarium, a dungeon filled with Corpus victims who've become bloated monsters. You meet Yagrum Bagarn, the last living Dwemer, a massively obese elf who served under Kagranak and survived only because he was in an outer realm when his entire race vanished. Fear provides an experimental cure that removes the negative effects but leaves the disease itself, making the Nerevarine immune to all disease and aging, functionally immortal. The final battle with Dagoth Ur defies villain conventions. Dagoth Ur maintains honor, allows the first strike, and offers a genuine alliance to drive the Empire from Morrowind. His tragedy, a loyal friend corrupted by the heart of Lorkhan while his brothers became gods through betrayal, makes him one of gaming's most compelling antagonists. The Nerevarine strikes the heart of Lorkhan 5 times with the Dwemer tools Sundar and Keening, destroying it and scattering its power. power. Duggoth-Ur becomes mortal and dies. The blight ends. And the Tribunal loses their divinity. The Tribunal expansion delivers the franchise's greatest villain monologue. Almalexia, maddened by her loss of godhood, murders Sothasil and lures the Nerevarine to the Clockwork City as a sacrifice. You were to be my greatest martyr. The heroic Nerevarine, sacrificing all to protect Morrowind from the mad Sothasil. The Nerevarine kills a living goddess. In Blood Moon, they defeat an aspect of the Daedric Prince Hircine in mortal combat on Solstheim. The body count of gods and godlike beings is unmatched. Michael Kirkbride shaped much of the Nerevarines' metaphysical depth. The concept represented a massive leap from Arena's generic fighter and Daggerfall's political agent to a prophecy-driven reincarnation embedded in an alien culture's religion, politics, and philosophy. Ken Rolston, as lead designer, wrote the outline of all quest lines himself. The result was the most narratively cohesive Elder Scrolls game ever made. After fulfilling their destiny, the Nerevarines sailed to Akavir, the mysterious eastern continent, and was never heard from again. That departure is the final masterstroke, where the Dragonborn may be trapped by Hermaeus Mora and the hero of Kvatch lost themselves in madness. The Nerevarines simply left on their own terms. GameRant's tier list placed them first. What sets the Nerevarine apart is that their fate is their own. One Reddit user captured it perfectly. So powerful he went off to Akavir out of boredom. The Nerevarine is the community's champion not because they're the strongest, but because their story trusts the player enough to leave the most important question unanswered and then lets them walk away into legend. The Dragonborn are some of the most powerful beings in Elder Scrolls history. Blessed by Akatosh with the blood and soul of a dragon, they were meant to protect humanity from forces no ordinary mortal could face. But not every Dragonborn answered that call. Some became legends, others became monsters, and the very first one, he became both. Let's start at the beginning, with the one who ruined everything, Miraak. Before there was a Dovahkiin saving the world in Skyrim, there was Miraak, and he wanted absolutely nothing to do with saving anyone. The first Dragonborn lived during the Merethic era, back when dragons ruled over humanity and dragon priests served as their enforcers. Miraak was one of those priests. Loyal, powerful, obedient. For a while, anyway. Here's where it gets complicated. At some point during his service, Miraak got his hands on a black book, one of Hermaeus Mora's lovely little doorways into Apocrypha. And Mora, being the tentacled knowledge hoarder that he is, saw an opportunity. He taught Miraak the Bend Will Shout, a thuum so powerful it could force dragons themselves into submission, not kill them, literally bend their will to his command, and Miraak did not use this gift politely. He turned on his dragon masters and started devouring their souls. If you visit his temple on Solstheim, you'll find dragon skeletons scattered along the pathway like some kind of horrific lawn decoration. The man was eating dragons the way you and I eat lunch, just casually, on a Tuesday. But here's the kicker. When the Dragon War broke out and ancient Nord heroes came begging for his help against Alduin, the literal world eater, Miraak said no. The one being on the planet specifically designed to protect humanity from dragons looked at the greatest dragon threat in history and said, not my problem, which is, not ideal. His fellow dragon priest Valak eventually challenged him, and the battle was so catastrophic it literally tore Solstheim away from the Skyrim mainland. An entire island ripped from a continent because two guys couldn't settle their differences. But before Valak could finish him off, Hermaeus Mora yanked Miraak into Apocrypha, trapping him in a realm of infinite knowledge and zero freedom. And that's the irony that makes Miraak tragic. He rejected his divine burden completely, choosing personal dominion over service. He traded the dragons for a Daedric prince, and spent thousands of years as a prisoner, not emerging until 4E201. The first Dragonborn ended up more enslaved than anyone he could have liberated. Every gift Akatosh could give, squandered for power he never got to use. But if Miraak represents what happens when a Dragonborn rejects their calling, the next one shows what happens when they embrace it completely. Saint Alessia. Miraak had the blood of a dragon and used it to serve himself. Alessia had the blood of a dragon and used it to free everyone else. And the way she got it is one of the most metal things in all of Elder Scrolls lore. See, Alessia wasn't born Dragonborn. She didn't inherit it. Akatosh, the dragon god of time, literally drew blood from his own divine heart and gave it to her, not as a reward, but as a contract. Covenant. As long as Alessia's bloodline maintained the dragon fires and kept up worship of Akatosh, the gates of oblivion would stay sealed. No Daedric invasions. No hellscape portals opening up in the middle of your Tuesday afternoon. The literal safety of the entire mortal world bound to one woman's bloodline, which is, a bit of pressure. But here's the thing. Alessia didn't just accept this divine burden and sit around looking holy. In 1E242, 242. She launched the Alessian slave rebellion against the Aelids, the Heartland High Elves, who had been enslaving humans for centuries. And these weren't your standard oppressors. The Aelids actively worshipped Daedric forces, using Daedra and undead to keep their human slaves in line. Alessia looked at all of that and said no. By 1E243, her forces had captured the White Gold Tower itself, and she declared herself the first Empress of Cyrodiil, former slave to Empress in roughly a year. Not bad, but conquering was only half the job. Alessia's empire was a patchwork of different peoples with different gods. The Nords worshipped one pantheon, the Elves followed another, and if she picked a side, the whole thing falls apart before the mortar dries. So she synthesized the Nordic and Aldmeri pantheons into a single unified religion, the 8 Divines, one framework that gave everyone something familiar to hold on to and prevented the kind of religious civil war that would have torn her empire apart in a generation. That's not just military leadership, that's political genius. And then there's her death. On her deathbed, Akatosh himself appeared and bound her soul directly into the Amulet of Kings. Alessia became the first human saint, and the amulet became the physical anchor of the covenant she'd established. For thousands of years after, every emperor who wore it was essentially carrying Alessia's soul around their neck, maintaining the barrier between Tamriel and oblivion through her sacrifice. She didn't just fulfill her divine burden, she became the mechanism. Her soul literally powers the protection of the entire world. Every dragonborn that came after her is measured against what she built, but the next one on our list took that template and turned it into something completely different. Because Riemann Cyrodiil didn't receive his dragonborn status from a god. He received it from an invading army. Riemann Cyrodiil. Every dragonborn we've talked about so far got their confirmation from a god, or discovered it through rebellion. Riemann Cyrodiil got his from an invading army that crossed an entire ocean just to find him. And that's not even the weirdest part. In 1E2700, the Tsaishi warriors of Akavir launched a full-scale invasion of Tamriel. This wasn't a raiding party. This was a coordinated military campaign from a continent most people in Tamriel had barely heard of. And for 3 years, they carved through everything in their path. Cyrodiil was fractured, disorganized, and completely unprepared. The Colovians and Nibonese couldn't agree on lunch, let alone a unified defense. So naturally, the Akaviri were winning. Enter Raman, a military leader who somehow unified the fractured armies into a single fighting force capable of actually defending the continent, which is, kind of important when snake warriors from another landmass are knocking on your door, but here's where it gets genuinely strange. At the Battle of Pale Pass in 1E2703, the Akaviri armies heard Raman's voice carry across the battlefield, and instead of fighting harder, they dropped to their knees, every single one of them. They surrendered on the spot and declared him Dragonborn, the chosen one they had actually been searching for this entire time. They didn't invade Tamriel to conquer it. They invaded Tamriel to find him. The entire war was essentially a very aggressive job interview, and Raymond passed. Alessia got her confirmation directly from Akatosh. Mirak figured it out through forbidden knowledge and Daedric pacts. Raymond had a foreign military force sail across an ocean, fight a 3-year war, and then kneel because they recognized something divine in his voice. That's not how you normally discover you're chosen, but here we are. What followed was even more impressive. Rather than executing the surrendered Akaviri, Riemann incorporated them into his forces. These former invaders became his elite military backbone, and with this expanded army, Riemann went on a conquest spree that would make most emperors weep. He founded the Second Empire and annexed High Rock, Skyrim, Valenwood, and the Somerset Isles. Nearly all of Tamriel fell under his banner. The only holdout was Morrowind, because Morrowind has always been difficult about everything. The Raymond dynasty lasted roughly 200 years, with his heirs maintaining Alessia's covenant with Akatosh. The dragonfires stayed lit, the barrier held. Raymond had taken what Alessia built and stretched it across an entire continent. And then there's the title. Raymond wasn't just called emperor, he was called the worldly god, not a saint like Alessia, a god, a man who spoke on a battlefield and made an entire invasion force surrender through sheer divine nature, then built an empire so vast people literally worshipped him for it. Where Alessia forged the lock, Raymond built a bigger door. But if Raymond's story sounds like the peak of what a dragonborn can achieve, wait until you hear about the one who took it even further and became an actual god in the pantheon. Tiber Septim. Every dragonborn before him built something. Tiber Septim built everything, and then he became a god for doing it. Born Hjalti Earlybeard, this man clawed his way from a general serving under King Kulakain of Falkreath to the single most powerful ruler Tamriel has ever ever seen. He was trained in the Thuum by the Greybeards themselves, and when the Nordic armies heard him use the voice, they joined him on the spot. From that moment forward, Tiber Septim did not stop conquering until there was literally nothing left to conquer. Here's the thing. Every other Dragonborn had limits. Alessia freed humanity but ruled one region. Riemann built an empire but never got Morrowind. Tiber Septim looked at the entire continent and said all of it. Through military conquest, political maneuvering, and a level of personal ambition that makes every other emperor look like they were playing on casual difficulty, he systematically dismantled every independent kingdom standing between him and total unification. But even Tiber Septim hit a wall. The Somerset Isles, home of the Altmer, magically advanced, geographically isolated, and historically unconquerable. Every previous empire had simply accepted that the High Elves were off the table, so he activated the Numidium. The Numidium was an ancient Dwemer construct of absolutely incomprehensible destructive power. Think of it as the nuclear option of Elder Scrolls lore, except nuclear weapons don't also break the fabric of reality when you set them off. Tiber Septim pointed it directly at the Somerset Isles without a second of hesitation. Actually, yeah, let's go take the Elf Island too, which is, not ideal for the elves. By 2E 896, Tiber Septim had accomplished what zero Dragonborn before him ever managed: the complete unification of every known territory on Tamriel under a single imperial banner, every province, every kingdom, every stubborn holdout. This ended the interregnum and kicked off the Third Era, a period of relative peace and stability that lasted over 400 years. The man conquered an entire continent, and the result was the longest stretch of peace in recorded history. His methods were brutal and often ruthless, but the outcome speaks for itself. And then he died in 3E38, and that's where the story gets truly insane. After his death, Tiber Septim underwent apotheosis. He didn't just get remembered fondly. He didn't get a statue or a holiday. He became a god. Talos, the ninth divine, added to the pantheon alongside the original 8. He is the only Dragonborn in history to transcend mortality entirely and join the gods as a peer. Alessia became a saint. Raman became a legend. Tiber Septim became divine. That's not a metaphor. He literally ascended to godhood. His divine burden was conquest and total unification, and he fulfilled it so completely that the universe itself promoted him. Every Dragonborn before him carried a piece of Akatosh's purpose. Tiber Septim carried the whole thing, and then asked for more. But if you think being descended from a literal god would keep his bloodline on the straight and narrow, you clearly haven't met the Wolf Queen, Patima Septim. Most Dragonborn on this list had a divine burden and either rose to meet it or ran from it. Patima Septim looked at hers, laughed, and set it on fire. Born in 3E67 to Emperor Pelagius Septim II, Patima entered the world with dynasty, dragon blood, and every advantage the Septim name could offer. Her grandfather took one look at her as a newborn and declared she appeared as a she-wolf ready to pounce, which is, not the most comforting thing to say about a baby. But the old man wasn't wrong. He was off by exactly 0%, because Patima didn't just grow up ambitious. She grew up to be one of the most destructive forces the Third Empire ever produced. In 3E121, a succession crisis erupted, and Patima saw her opening. Rather than accept her place in the imperial hierarchy, she rallied armies from Skyrim, High Rock, and Northern Morrowind, and personally led forces into battle. The result was the War of the Red Diamond, a 16-year succession conflict that turned the empire into a graveyard. And I don't mean that metaphorically. Entire regions were depopulated, trade routes collapsed, farmland burned, civilians starved in provinces that hadn't seen a soldier in months. Most of the imperial family was murdered during the fighting, which is impressive in the worst possible way. Patima didn't just want the Ruby Throne, she wanted everyone between her and it to stop breathing. But here's where it gets genuinely dark. As the war turned against her, Patima didn't surrender. She pivoted to necromancy. And not amateur raise a skeleton or two necromancy. Patima became one of the most accomplished necromancers in Skyrim's entire history, raising full armies of undead to replace her dwindling living forces. Some accounts suggest she pursued Daedric pacts to sustain her campaign, reaching out to powers that would have made Alessia weep. Her divine burden was stewardship, protection. She chose to raise the dead and bargain with darkness instead. She died during the Siege of Solitude in 3E137 at the age of 70, cornered in the very city she'd ruled. 70 years old and still fighting, still refusing to let go of a throne she never actually claimed. You almost have to respect the commitment. Almost. But even death might not have been the end of it. Before she died, Patima passed a sinister wolf-shaped pendant to her nephew Pelagius. That nephew went on to become Pelagius III, better known as the Mad Emperor, a ruler so mentally unstable his reign became one of the most infamous disasters in Septim history. Scholars have long debated whether that pendant carried some form of curse, a final act of spite from a woman who couldn't win the throne but could still poison the bloodline that kept it from her. Potema had everything: the blood, the name, the ability. She could have been a stabilizing force for the empire. Instead, she chose to burn it all for a crown she never wore, and historians classify her as unambiguously evil. No asterisks. No, well, from her perspective, just evil. But if Potema represents what happens when a dragonborn chooses destruction from within the bloodline, wait until you hear about someone who may have stolen the blood itself: Mankar Camoran. Mankar Camoran is either the most dangerous dragonborn who ever lived, or the greatest fraud in Elder Scrolls history, and nobody, not the lore community, not Bethesda, not the in-game texts, has ever given us a definitive answer, which makes him the single most unsettling name on this entire list. Here's what we know for sure. Mankar Camoran was the illegitimate son of Camoran the Usurper and his Bosmer mistress Kalis. He was an Altmer who founded the Order of the Mythic Dawn, a Daedric cult dedicated to Mehrunes Dagon, the Prince of Destruction, and in 3E 433, he orchestrated the assassination of Emperor Uriel Septim VII and every known Septim heir, triggering the Oblivion Crisis and Mehrunes Dagon's full-scale invasion of Tamriel. That's the single most destructive act any alleged dragonborn ever committed. Not Mirak's rebellion, not Potema's civil war. Camoran literally opened the door for a Daedric prince to walk into the Imperial City. But here's where it gets complicated. The strongest evidence that Mankar Camoran was a real dragonborn: he wore the Amulet of Kings. That's not a piece of jewelry you just throw on. The amulet has absolute restrictions. It slips from the neck of any wearer who doesn't have dragon blood. Every historical account agrees on this. The thing is basically a divine lie detector for dragonborn status, and Camoran passed the test. Then there's his own writing. In the first book of his Mythic Dawn commentaries, Camoran claims that after speaking with another tongue, he could speak fire within 3 nights. 3 nights. Normal mortals train with the Greybeards for years, sometimes decades, to master a single shout. Mastering fire breath in 3 days is described as flatly impossible unless the person already had inherent dragonborn capabilities, unless the power was already inside him, waiting to be unlocked. So, here's the question that has kept the lore community arguing for nearly 20 years. Was he real, or was he a fake? And here's the terrifying part. Both answers are bad. If Mankar Camoran was a genuine dragonborn, that means Akatosh's gift, the same divine blood given to Alessia to protect humanity, can be wielded by someone who wants to burn it all down. It means the Covenant isn't a safeguard. It's just power, and power doesn't care who uses it. A dragonborn can serve a Daedric prince, murder an emperor, and rip open the gates of oblivion while wearing the very amulet designed to keep those gates shut. If he was a fraud, that's arguably worse, because it means Daedric princes can manufacture fake dragonborn. It means Mehrunes Dagon found a way to bypass Akatosh's most sacred restriction, fooling the Amulet of Kings itself. And if one Daedric prince can do it, what's stopping the others? Either way, the foundation cracks. Nobody talks about this enough. Camoran didn't just kill an emperor. He broke the question of what dragonborn even means. Every other name on this list, you can point to their blood, their lineage, their divine moment. With Camoran, you get a question mark. And that question mark brought Tamriel closer to annihilation than any dragon, any war, any necromancer queen ever did. Speaking of the emperor he murdered, let's talk about the man who saw it coming and couldn't stop it: Uriel Septim. 7. Uriel Septim VII ruled Tamriel for 65 years. 65 years on the Ruby Throne, from 3E 368 until his assassination in 3E 433. He was 87 years old when he died. One of the longest reigns in the entire history of the Empire. And on paper, that sounds like stability. But here's the thing. Uriel's reign wasn't a golden age. It was a slow, quiet collapse dressed up in imperial robes. The first real crack came in 3E 389 when his own imperial battle mage, Jagger Tharn, betrayed him. Tharn used magic to literally imprison the emperor and replace him on the throne. For 10 years, the real Uriel Septim sat in a magical prison while an imposter wore his face and ran his empire into the ground. Provinces drifted. Alliances frayed. The whole structure Tiber Septim had spent a lifetime building started rotting from the inside, and nobody even knew it was happening. It took a figure known as the Eternal Champion to defeat Tharn and restore Uriel to power. And to his credit, Uriel tried. He released the Nerevarine in Morrowind. He worked to reassert imperial authority over territories that had tasted independence during Tharn's usurpation. But the damage was done. 10 years of magical identity theft doesn't exactly patch over easily, and then Then came the mythic Dawn. In 3E433, a Daedric cult dedicated to Mehrunes Dagon assassinated Uriel Septim VII, alongside every single one of his known heirs. Everyone, the entire legitimate Septim bloodline, wiped out in a coordinated strike designed to break the Covenant. Without a Dragonborn Emperor to light the dragon fires, the barrier between Tamriel and Oblivion collapsed. Gates tore open across the continent. Daedra poured through. The Oblivion crisis had begun. But there was one heir nobody accounted for, an illegitimate son named Martin Septim, hidden away in a chapel in Kvatch, completely unaware of his bloodline. Martin briefly became the last Septim Emperor. Briefly, because the only way to stop Mehrunes Dagon from physically manifesting in the Imperial City was for Martin to shatter the Amulet of Kings and channel the power of Akatosh directly through his own body. He did it. He became the avatar of Akatosh, a golden dragon that drove Dagon back into oblivion. And then Martin was gone. The amulet was destroyed. The dragon fires went dark permanently. Alessia's covenant, the divine agreement that had protected Tamriel across 3 entire eras, was over. The Septim dynasty ended not with a whimper, but with the total destruction of everything that had made it divine. Uriel's burden was preservation, and despite 65 years of trying, the forces against him proved overwhelming. He couldn't stop Tharn, he couldn't rebuild what was lost, and he couldn't protect his own children from a cult that wanted to watch the world burn. Sometimes the divine burden isn't about what you accomplish. It's about how long you can hold the walls together before they finally come down. But if the Septim line ended with Martin's sacrifice, and the Amulet of Kings was shattered, and the Covenant was broken, then who exactly showed up 200 years later with the blood of a dragon, and the voice to prove it? The last Dragonborn. Every Dragonborn we've talked about had something behind them. Alessia had a divine covenant and an army of freed slaves. Remen had the Akaviri kneeling at his feet. Tiber Septim had the Numidium and the political machinery of an entire continent. Miraak had forbidden knowledge and a cult of devoted followers. The last Dragonborn had nothing. No army, no dynasty, no empire. Just a prophecy carved into Alduin's wall and a date with the end of the world. In 4E201, Alduin the World Eater returned, not from some distant realm, but from time itself. The ancient Nord heroes who fought him during the Dragon War couldn't kill him, so they used an Elder Scroll to rip him out of the timeline entirely, punting him forward through the ages like a problem for someone else to deal with. Which is, not ideal for the someone else. That someone else turned out to be an unknown prisoner about to get their head chopped off in Helgen. Alduin's arrival interrupted the execution, and shortly after this, nobody killed the dragon Myrmilnir and absorbed its soul. The Greybeards felt it immediately and shouted Dovahkiin across the land, a summons that echoed from High Hrothgar to every corner of Skyrim. One word. That was the entire job interview. Here's where it gets complicated. To defeat Alduin, the last Dragonborn needed the Dragonrend shout, a technique invented by mortals during the Dragon War, specifically designed to force dragons to comprehend mortality. Dragons are immortal beings. The concept of ending, of not existing, is literally incomprehensible to them. Dragonrend shoves that concept into their minds and it breaks them, temporarily grounds them, makes them vulnerable, but nobody alive knew the shout. So the last Dragonborn used an Elder Scroll to enter the time wound at the throat of the world and witness the original battle against Alduin firsthand. They learned Dragonrend by literally being present at its creation. Then they came back and used it. Alduin. His name translates to Destroyer, Devour, Master. Some scholars consider him not just a servant of Akatosh, but an alternative manifestation of the dragon god of time himself. The entity that created the flow of time might also be the entity destined to end it. The last Dragonborn's divine burden was to stop that from happening. Not to build an empire, not to claim a throne, just save everything. And that's what makes the last Dragonborn the most important one on this entire list. Every other Dragonborn had institutional support, political power, or at minimum a religious order backing their play. The last Dragonborn had the Greybeards and a really steep mountain to climb. The divine burden here was the purest version of what Akatosh intended when he first blessed a mortal with dragon blood. No politics, no ambition, just protection. The symmetry is almost too clean. Thousands of years earlier, Miraak was given this exact same gift, the first Dragonborn, blessed by Akatosh, capable of devouring dragon souls, powerful enough to reshape the world, and he refused. He rejected his divine purpose, sold his soul to Hermaeus Mora, and let humanity fend for itself. The last Dragonborn finished what Miraak wouldn't start, an unknown hero with no name, no legacy, and no reason to fight other than the fact that someone Had to. Akatosh blessed the first mortal with dragon blood, and that mortal said no. Thousands of years later, he blessed another, and that one said yes. That's the entire story of the Dragonborn. That's the cycle completed. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.